The courtroom was silent, a heavy tension hanging in the air. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second stretching longer than the last. People shuffled in their seats, murmurs rising and falling like waves against the shore. All eyes were on one man standing at the front, a man who had, for years, been hailed as a visionary, a genius, and the future of technology. Elon Musk, the man who had made electric cars cool, the man who launched rockets to Mars, the man who, for better or worse, had captivated the world's imagination. But today, he wasn't here as a tech mogul or a space pioneer. No, today, he was here as a defendant, a fraud. The judge, an elderly woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, glanced over the papers in front of her before setting them aside with a soft thud. Her gaze shifted to Musk, who stood motionless, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Musk," she began, her voice carrying the weight of authority, "you are accused of misleading investors, inflating the value of your companies, and presenting false information to the public in a way that has cost people millions of dollars. How do you plead?" A slight silence hung in the air, broken only by the rustle of paper as Musk's lawyer, a slick man in a perfectly tailored suit, leaned in to whisper something in his ear. Musk didn't respond immediately. Instead, he adjusted his glasses, looking out at the crowd, his eyes scanning the faces of reporters, lawyers, and spectators in the gallery. Some faces looked sympathetic, others accusatory. Musk's mouth twitched slightly, a faint smirk playing on his lips for just a moment. Then, finally, he spoke. "Not guilty," he said simply, his voice calm, but with an underlying tension that sent a ripple through the room. His words were deliberate, measured. He wasn't just denying the charges, he was stating his truth. But truth had a funny way of shifting in the glare of public scrutiny. As the courtroom erupted in quiet conversations, Musk's response seemed almost too rehearsed, too confident. One of the reporters sitting near the back stood up, his notepad in hand, clearly itching for a story. "Mr. Musk," he called out, "do you really expect us to believe that all the allegations against you are false? That nothing untoward happened with Tesla's stock, or the claims about the production timeline for your vehicles? How can you explain your tweets about taking Tesla private?" The room went silent. Everyone, journalists, lawyers, even Musk himself, turned toward Holloway. What was he implying? What could possibly be more important than the accusations against Musk? And then, the lawyer dropped the bombshell. "Elon Musk," he began, "is not just a billionaire tech mogul. He is the CIA's highest-ranking official in the tech world." The words hung in the air, and the courtroom erupted into chaos. In that moment, the narrative shifted. The allegations of fraud, the accusations of misleading investors, they all seemed secondary now. The story had just taken a shocking turn. Musk, the man who had been under fire for years, now found himself entangled in a much bigger, much more dangerous game. What was the truth? Was Musk really a fraud? Or was he something else entirely? As the courtroom buzzed with shock and disbelief, the questions only grew louder. The whispers had started, and now there was no turning back. This was only the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The courtroom had barely settled when the weight of the revelation began to sink in. Elon Musk wasn't just a tech mogul. He was more than the creator of Tesla and SpaceX. He wasn't just the guy who shot a car into space or revolutionized electric vehicles. No, according to his lawyer, Musk was entangled in something far bigger, the CIA's highest-ranking official in the tech world. As the murmurs in the room turned into a cacophony of disbelief, Musk remained calm, almost unnervingly so. His face, typically a mixture of intensity and eccentricity, betrayed little emotion. He looked like a man who had been preparing for this moment for years. But what did it mean? How could this genius inventor, known for his ambitious projects and futuristic ideas, also be at the center of a covert government operation? The answer to that question didn't lie in the courtroom. It lay in the untold story of Musk's past, a story that, until now, had been hidden beneath layers of myth and media hype. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, on June 28, 1971. Elon Musk was no stranger to ambition. His father, Elon Musk, was an electromechanical engineer, and his mother, May Musk, was a model and dietitian. From a young age, Musk exhibited signs of brilliance and a curious, sometimes rebellious nature. His parents divorced when he was young, and it seemed that the young Elon was determined to chart his own path, one that would be marked by both brilliance and controversy. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Musk's face hardened slightly. The public hadn't always been kind to him, but this trial was something different. This was more than just a lawsuit. This was an attack on everything he had built, on everything he stood for. "You have to understand," Musk began slowly, his eyes locking onto the reporter, "that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than what's being reported. I've never misled anyone intentionally. The tech world, the business world, it's messy. But I've always believed in the long-term vision." There was a pause. The reporter wasn't satisfied with that answer. "And the documents that show discrepancies in your financial reporting?" he pressed. Musk didn't flinch. "I'll let the court decide. But those documents are part of a bigger story. A story that may not be what it seems." The judge, sensing the rising tension, slammed her gavel down. "Order in the court," she demanded, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. "We will proceed with the evidence." The room quieted, but the unease didn't disappear. Everyone in the courtroom could sense it, the undercurrent of something more, something hidden beneath the surface. This wasn't just a case about misleading investors. There was something darker lurking in the background. For years, Elon Musk had been an enigma, a brilliant mind, a disruptor, a man who had achieved the impossible. But now, the cracks were beginning to show. What had been hailed as innovative genius was now under a microscope, dissected by critics and financial analysts. Musk had always lived on the edge of controversy, but this trial, was different. This was a direct attack on his legacy. As the day wore on, Musk's legal team worked tirelessly to refute the claims, but the evidence against him seemed overwhelming. Musk sat at the defendant's table, his face a mask of calm determination, though anyone with a keen eye could see the subtle twitch of his fingers. He had built an empire on risk, on pushing boundaries, but now, that very empire was crumbling beneath him. The courtroom was packed with media, eager for the latest scoop on the high-profile trial. Outside, the streets were lined with reporters, cameras trained on the building, ready to capture every twist and turn of the proceedings. This was more than just a court case. It was a spectacle that had already begun to shape public opinion. And yet, in the midst of the chaos, something unexpected happened. Musk's lawyer, a man named Greg Holloway, stood up and made an unexpected announcement. "There is something you need to know," he said, his voice steady but carrying a sense of urgency. "The truth of this case isn't just about business transactions or stock prices. There are connections, hidden ties, things the public doesn't know." In his early years, Musk was introverted, often spending his time reading books about science, technology, and business. His fascination with computers and electronics started early. At age 12, he taught himself computer programming and sold his first software, a video game called Blaster, for $500. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was a clear indication of his entrepreneurial spirit. Musk left South Africa for Canada at age 17, seeking opportunities that weren't available to him back home. He attended Queen's University in Ontario for 2 years before transferring to the University of Pennsylvania in the United States. It was here that Musk began to develop his big ideas. He earned degrees in both physics and economics, and his mind was constantly working on grand, world-changing concepts. The stage was set for what would eventually become his empire. In the early 90s, Musk moved to Silicon Valley to pursue his dreams. His first major venture, Zip2, was a software company designed to help newspapers build an online presence. It was eventually sold to Compaq for nearly $300 million, which Musk used to fund his next, more ambitious projects. But the real turning point in Musk's life came when he founded X.com, which would later become PayPal. PayPal revolutionized online payments, and when it was bought by eBay in 2002 for $1.5 billion, Musk walked away with $180 million. At the time, he was still relatively young, and his financial success was only a small part of his greater vision. Musk's goals weren't just about making money. He was deeply motivated by the desire to solve humanity's greatest challenges, namely, energy, space exploration, and artificial intelligence. This vision led him to Tesla, SpaceX, and other ventures that would solidify his place in the tech world. However, the world didn't fully understand the extent to which these ventures were interwoven with his deeper ties to the government, specifically the CIA. As the years went by, Musk's public persona began to take shape. On one hand, he was the eccentric billionaire who tweeted outrageous ideas and made bold promises. On the other hand, he was a visionary, someone who pushed the boundaries of technology and sought to create a better future for humanity. His work with Tesla made electric cars mainstream, and SpaceX's accomplishments, such as reusable rockets and the goal of colonizing Mars, further cemented his status as a modern-day innovator. But behind closed doors, Musk's rise wasn't just a story of personal ambition and technical genius. It was also a story of government influence and covert operations. The idea of a CIA connection might sound far-fetched to the public, but the truth was that Musk's ventures were always tied to high-level government interests. SpaceX, for example, was not just a private company seeking to revolutionize space exploration. It was also a major contractor for the U.S. government. NASA, the Department of Defense, and intelligence agencies all relied on Musk's company for launching satellites, providing transportation to the International Space Station, and more. It wasn't a coincidence that Musk's biggest projects always seemed to align with U.S. defense and intelligence needs. Whether it was the development of autonomous electric vehicles or the exploration of new energy sources, Musk's companies had the right mix of technological innovation and government backing. And as his star continued to rise in the tech world, so too did his relationship with powerful government agencies, particularly the CIA. While the public saw Musk as a genius inventor and charismatic leader, those in the know understood that his role went far beyond that. He wasn't just the face of Tesla or SpaceX. Musk had become a key player in the U.S. government's long-term strategy to dominate the future of technology, space, and artificial intelligence. But how deep did this involvement really go? What did Musk know about the true nature of his partnerships with government agencies? And most importantly, how did all of this influence his decisions in both business and personal life? These were questions that only Musk could answer. But even now, as the trial began, it was clear that no one truly knew who the real Elon Musk was. The world had always been fascinated by him, by his ambition, his success, and his often controversial behavior. But now, as the public learned of Musk's connections to the CIA, everything was being called into question. Was he a fraud, as the court case suggested? Or was he a man caught in the middle of something much bigger? A game played by powerful forces beyond his control? As the trial continued, Musk remained tight-lipped about the details of his government involvement. But one thing became clear. The man who had changed the world with his innovations was now at the center of a conspiracy that had the power to reshape everything. And the truth, it seemed, was far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. The world was about to learn that the story of Elon Musk was more than just a tale of technological triumphs and failures. It was a story of power, control, and the fine line between genius and deception. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Musk's face hardened slightly. The public hadn't always been kind to him, but this trial was something different. This was more than just a lawsuit. This was an attack on everything he had built, on everything he stood for. You have to understand, Musk began slowly, his eyes locking onto the reporter, that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than what's being reported. I've never misled anyone intentionally. The tech world, the business world, it's messy. But I've always believed in the long-term vision. There was a pause. The reporter wasn't satisfied with that answer. "And the documents that show discrepancies in your financial reporting?" he pressed. Musk didn't flinch. "I'll let the court decide. But those documents are part of a bigger story. A story that may not be what it seems." The judge, sensing the rising tension, slammed her gavel down. "Order in the court," she demanded, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. "We will proceed with the evidence." The room quieted, but the unease didn't disappear. Everyone in the courtroom could sense it, the undercurrent of something more, something hidden beneath the surface. This wasn't just a case about misleading investors. There was something darker lurking in the background. For years, Elon Musk had been an enigma, a brilliant mind, a disruptor, a man who had achieved the impossible. But now, the cracks were beginning to show. What had been hailed as innovative genius was now under a microscope, dissected by critics and financial analysts. Musk had always lived on the edge of controversy, but this trial, was different. This was a direct attack on his legacy. As the day wore on, Musk's legal team worked tirelessly to refute the claims, but the evidence against him seemed overwhelming. Musk sat at the defendant's table, his face a mask of calm determination, though anyone with a keen eye could see the subtle twitch of his fingers. He had built an empire on risk, on pushing boundaries, but now, that very empire was crumbling beneath him. The courtroom was packed with media, eager for the latest scoop on the high-profile trial. Outside, the streets were lined with reporters, cameras trained on the building, ready to capture every twist and turn of the proceedings. This was more than just a court case. It was a spectacle that had already begun to shape public opinion. And yet, in the midst of the chaos, something unexpected happened. Musk's lawyer, a man named Greg Holloway, stood up and made an unexpected announcement. "There is something you need to know," he said, his voice steady but carrying a sense of urgency. "The truth of this case isn't just about business transactions or stock prices. There are connections, hidden ties, things the public doesn't know." What would Musk do now? What would the world think when they realized that the man who had taken humanity to the stars was also playing a dangerous game of shadows? The answers to those questions were still to come. But one thing was certain. The road ahead would be unlike anything anyone had ever expected. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Elon Musk's lawyer, Greg Holloway, had just dropped a bombshell revelation. Musk, the Silicon Valley titan, was allegedly a top CIA official. The words echoed in the minds of everyone present. Was this just a defense tactic to divert attention? Or was there more to this story than anyone had imagined? Outside the courtroom, the media frenzy began to build. Headlines popped up across news outlets. Elon Musk, tech mogul or CIA insider? The story was spreading like wildfire. For the first time, the world wasn't just questioning Musk's business practices. They were questioning his loyalty, his motives, his entire persona. But Musk, sitting at the defense table, didn't seem fazed. He leaned back in his chair, his arms folded across his chest, staring at the wall ahead of him. It was as if the accusations, fraud, espionage, manipulation, had all become a blur, something he had already prepared for long before entering the courtroom. Still, the question lingered. What did this mean? How did the CIA fit into the picture of Elon Musk, the man who promised to revolutionize the world with electric cars, solar energy, and space travel? A few days after the dramatic revelation in court, Musk's legal team released a statement, addressing the allegations in a vague but purposeful way. It was clear that they were playing a careful game, walking a tightrope between denying the CIA claim and keeping Musk's reputation intact. The public was left with more questions than answers, and the media had only one goal now: to uncover the truth. For those who had been close to Musk over the years, however, this wasn't a complete shock. There had always been rumors, whispers in tech circles, behind-the-scenes discussions in government meetings. Musk's companies had never operated in isolation. They had always been entwined with government contracts, secretive projects, and military interests. Whether it was the development of advanced rocket technologies at SpaceX or Tesla's work with the Department of Energy, Musk's ventures had always aligned closely with the interests of powerful organizations. But the truth of Musk's involvement with the CIA went far deeper than just business deals. It was the kind of relationship that only a few people in the world could fully comprehend. A relationship built on mutual benefit, hidden agendas, and layers of secrecy. And it was only a matter of time before the truth started to surface. The first significant breakthrough came when a former employee of Tesla, James Ritter, came forward with a shocking confession. Ritter had worked closely with Musk during the early years of Tesla, and he was one of the few who had direct access to the inner workings of the company. His statements were carefully phrased, but they painted a picture of a company that was more than just a car manufacturer. According to Ritter, Tesla had always been involved in classified government projects, particularly related to energy storage and military-grade technologies. I remember being asked to develop a new type of battery technology, Ritter recalled in an interview with a prominent journalist. It wasn't just for electric cars, it was for something else, something bigger. When pressed about whether these projects had any connection to the government, Ritter hesitated. I don't know if I can say for sure, he said, but we were working on things that went beyond consumer products. And I know for a fact that the government had a hand in many of those projects. Musk wasn't just a businessman. He had connections that most people wouldn't believe. The revelation sent shockwaves through the media. Was Musk truly involved in government operations from the very beginning? Did his work with Tesla and SpaceX have more to do with national security than electric cars and space travel? But even as the press dug deeper, another conflict was brewing. Musk's trial, which had already captivated the nation, was intensifying. The prosecution had gathered what appeared to be irrefutable evidence of fraud. Misleading statements about Tesla's financial health, inflated stock values, and misleading public announcements. But these were mere details in the grand scheme of things. The prosecution wasn't just interested in Musk's business practices anymore. They wanted answers to the bigger question. Who was Elon Musk, really? And that's when the first bombshell from Musk's past was revealed. A leaked report from a former government insider, someone who had worked within the CIA for decades, surfaced online. The document outlined Musk's involvement with the agency in the early 2000s, long before the world had heard of Tesla or SpaceX. The report claimed that Musk had been recruited by the CIA after his success with PayPal, brought in to work on top-secret projects related to space exploration, satellite technology, and artificial intelligence. According to the report, Musk's role was not just that of a contractor or consultant. He had been working closely with government officials, using his knowledge of technology to develop advanced systems for surveillance, data collection, and communication. These systems, the report suggested, were part of a larger plan to enhance national security, projects that Musk had always been tight-lipped about. The CIA connection, if true, explained a lot. It explained why Musk's ventures had consistently aligned with government interests. It explained why his companies had received millions in government contracts. And it explained why Musk had been able to navigate the murky waters of business and politics with such ease. But the report raised more questions than it answered. Why had Musk kept his involvement with the CIA secret for so long? What role had he played in some of the most sensitive operations of the U.S. government? And most importantly, what did the CIA know about his business practices? Were they complicit in his alleged fraud, or were they simply using Musk as a pawn in a much larger game? Back in the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Musk's defense team had been working tirelessly to spin the narrative in his favor, emphasizing his contributions to technology and national security. But the prosecution had their own set of cards to play. They were determined to connect the dots between Musk's public image and his secretive government ties. It wasn't just a battle over stock prices and misleading statements anymore. This was a war for Musk's very identity. Was he the genius entrepreneur the world believed him to be? Or was he something far more dangerous, a player in a global game of espionage, power, and manipulation? As the trial dragged on, more people began to wonder, who was Elon Musk really? A visionary, a fraud, or something in between? And what was the true story behind his rise to power? The courtroom wasn't just a place of legal proceedings anymore. It had become a battlefield where the future of one man, and perhaps the future of the entire technological landscape, was at stake. Musk was about to face the hardest fight of his life, and the stakes were higher than anyone could have imagined. But no one knew yet the depths of the conspiracy that was about to unfold. What was coming next would change everything. The courtroom was a theater of suspense, with each new revelation spinning a more complex web. Every day, new faces appeared, each one revealing something that contradicted the story Musk had tried to sell to the world. The CIA accusation was no longer just a fleeting rumor. It was the center of the case. People began to wonder, had Elon Musk been playing both sides all along? Was his rise to prominence more about strategic manipulation than innovation? While the media focused on the CIA connection, they were missing something crucial: Musk's calm, collected demeanor. It was as though he had been preparing for this moment his entire life. His team had managed to keep a tight lid on most of his past dealings with intelligence agencies, but now, it seemed that the lid was beginning to crack. In the midst of the chaos outside the courthouse inside, the prosecution's case grew stronger. The evidence of Musk's supposed fraudulent activities was stacked high: misleading statements about Tesla's stock, overstatements of the company's progress, and accusations of manipulative business tactics. But the deeper the trial went, the more it became clear that the focus was shifting. The allegations of financial deception were no longer the primary concern. People weren't asking whether he had lied to investors anymore. They were asking what else Musk was involved in and who he had been working with. The prosecution's strategy shifted gears. They subpoenaed documents, scoured Musk's email history, and dug through his past business deals. And then, they found it, something that neither Musk nor his defense team had anticipated. It was an innocuous email at first glance, just another corporate communication about a Tesla partnership. But upon closer inspection, it was clear that it wasn't just business. The email contained references to classified projects and secure channels, terms that had no place in a standard corporate email. Further digging revealed a chain of emails that dated back to the early 2000s, when Musk was still fresh off the sale of PayPal and trying to carve his place in the tech world. The emails were vague, almost coded, but they left no doubt. Musk had been in contact with high-ranking officials in the Department of Defense, NASA, and the CIA. These weren't just routine business negotiations. They were discussions about government-funded research projects, military technologies, and, strangely, space surveillance systems. The more the prosecution looked, the more it seemed that Musk had been a key player in the government's push to integrate private companies into their military and intelligence operations. Musk's lawyer, Greg Holloway, knew they had a massive problem on their hands. This wasn't just a financial misstep, it was a potential national security issue. The defense team scrambled to prepare a response. They needed to shift the narrative fast, or they risked losing Musk's credibility for good. But in the quiet behind the scenes, Musk wasn't panicking. He was quietly reviewing the documents in his office, tapping his fingers against the edge of the desk. Despite the media frenzy, despite the pressure mounting from all sides, Musk was calm, almost eerily so. As the trial progressed, Musk's past became less of a mystery and more of a puzzle. One by one, the pieces began to fit together, showing a man who had always been a step ahead of the world. It wasn't just that Musk had advanced technologies. He had always known where the world was heading, and his secret partnerships, his involvement in covert operations, and his ties to the CIA were all a part of that grand plan. The pivotal moment came when an anonymous whistleblower, a former contractor for SpaceX, approached the prosecution with more explosive information. The whistleblower claimed that Musk had been involved in a series of classified satellite projects that had nothing to do with commercial space exploration and everything to do with military-grade technology. "I worked on satellites with Musk's teams," the whistleblower said in an encrypted interview. But these weren't regular satellites. They were part of a network of spy satellites for the CIA. Musk's company was deeply involved in defense projects, though they were presented to the public as space exploration initiatives. The whistleblower revealed that Musk had signed non-disclosure agreements and operated under top-secret clearance, meaning his true activities were hidden under layers of bureaucracy and legal protection. While the world knew Musk for his civilian endeavors, this man had seen the other side. The side that involved the darkest corners of government contracts. The media frenzy hit a new height. What had been an intriguing courtroom drama was now a full-blown conspiracy theory that had captured the attention of the entire world. The narrative shifted completely. Was Elon Musk, the brilliant innovator and tech mogul, actually an orchestrator of covert operations? Was he more than just a businessman? Was he a pawn in a larger government agenda? Or something far more dangerous? As reporters dug deeper, new revelations emerged. Musk's ties to private intelligence contractors, aerospace firms with classified work, and his role in advanced satellite technology didn't just blur the lines between business and government, it obliterated them. The world, which had once seen Musk as a hero of progress, began to view him with suspicion. His public image, carefully constructed through media appearances, TED Talks, and social media posts, had been shattered. People started asking themselves, Was the man who promised to take humanity to Mars secretly building tools of surveillance, control, and warfare? But even as the world reeled from the revelations, Musk's own resolve remained unbroken. As the trial entered its second week, he took the stand to testify for the first time. His face, once the subject of memes and adoration, was now stoic, unreadable. He was no longer the quirky entrepreneur who made bold promises on Twitter. This was a different Musk, the kind who had stared down the highest powers in the world and now had to face them in a courtroom. "Mr. Musk," the prosecutor began, his voice cold, "you have been accused of using your companies to conceal fraudulent activities and to collaborate with government agencies in operations that the public knows nothing about. How do you respond?" Musk took a deep breath. He could feel the weight of the world pressing on his shoulders, but he had always thrived under pressure. The courtroom fell silent, all eyes fixed on him. "I've always been transparent about my goals," Musk said calmly. "I've always been open about my vision for the future. But the truth is, there are things the public doesn't need to know. There are projects that, for the sake of security, must remain hidden." He paused, his eyes scanning the room, locking with the eyes of the jurors. "What I do, what I've always done. It's about pushing humanity forward. And sometimes, pushing humanity forward requires working with forces beyond the public eye." The words hung in the air. Was this an admission of guilt? Or was Musk laying the groundwork for a much larger truth? A truth that would change everything? The world would have to wait for the answer. But one thing was certain. Musk was no longer just fighting accusations of fraud. He was fighting for his life, his freedom, and the truth behind everything he had built. And as the courtroom drama unfolded, it became clear. This trial wasn't just about money, power, or deception. It was about control of a future that no one fully understood yet. The days following Elon Musk's testimony were filled with uncertainty, tension, and mounting intrigue. The court of public opinion had become a battleground, with factions forming on either side. Some saw Musk as a visionary, misunderstood and now facing an unjust attack. Others viewed him as a puppet, a mere cog in a much larger machine, caught in a web of deceit that stretched far beyond his personal interests. As the trial continued, the stakes grew even higher, and Musk, for the first time, found himself questioning the very foundations of the empire he had built. The courtroom was packed, the energy electric with anticipation. Musk's defense team had managed to delay the proceedings for a few days, but now, the trial was reaching a breaking point. With each new revelation, the public was beginning to understand that the case wasn't just about financial misconduct. It was about far-reaching government control, secretive military operations, and the future of technological innovation. The deeper the lawyers dug, the more the walls seemed to crumble. It felt like an avalanche. Once it started, there was no way to stop it. Inside the courthouse, Musk sat quietly in the defendant's chair, his face unreadable. His lawyer, Greg Holloway, stood nearby, preparing for the cross-examination that was about to take place. Holloway had become Musk's most trusted advisor throughout this ordeal. A seasoned litigator, Holloway had seen the tactics that both the prosecution and the media had employed against his client. But even he couldn't predict what was coming next. The courtroom doors opened, and a tall, imposing figure entered. It was Dr. Walter Harris, a former CIA analyst with decades of experience in espionage and covert operations. Harris had been brought in by the defense team as a last-minute expert witness. His testimony had the potential to change the entire narrative of the trial. If Musk's involvement with the CIA was indeed legitimate, then Harris's words could paint him in a different light, one that wasn't solely defined by the shadow of deception. The room fell silent as Harris walked to the witness stand. He was an older man, his face etched with years of experience in the field. He looked directly at Musk, giving him a brief nod of acknowledgement. It was clear that Harris knew more about Musk's past than anyone else in the room. Harris cleared his throat and began speaking in a calm, authoritative tone. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court, I have spent the majority of my career in the world of intelligence. My work has focused on technological innovations that serve the national security interests of this country. And in that work, I had many occasions to collaborate with Elon Musk. What I am here to tell you today is that his role in these operations was not only crucial, It was integral to our success. A murmur ran through the courtroom. People exchanged looks, unsure of where this testimony was heading. Harris paused, letting his words sink in. What Mr. Musk does not want you to know, Harris continued, is that his involvement with the CIA and other government agencies goes far beyond anything that has been presented here. He has been involved in projects that directly contribute to our national defense, projects that required a mind capable of thinking outside the box, a mind that could revolutionize industries, from space exploration to energy to artificial intelligence. He paused again, his eyes scanning the courtroom. Elon Musk was never just a businessman. He was, and is, an asset to the United States government. His companies were not only designed to be profitable, they were designed to protect the future of this country. The room was silent. It was as though everyone was holding their breath, trying to absorb the weight of Harris's words. Was this the defense Musk had been hoping for? Or was it too late to change the tide of the trial? Harris's words were damning. If true, they suggested that Musk had always operated in a gray area, one where his personal ambitions and his obligations to the government were intertwined. It wasn't just that Musk had helped the CIA in some covert capacity. According to Harris, Musk's role in the government's technological operations was essential, almost strategic. But why had this been kept a secret for so long? And what had Musk really known about the larger implications of his actions? The prosecution didn't waste time. They immediately pressed Harris with questions, attempting to tear apart his testimony and suggest that Musk's actions were not as altruistic as he claimed. They questioned the legitimacy of the projects Musk had been involved with and the morality of his secretive partnerships. They also honed in on the fact that Musk had never openly acknowledged his government ties, raising doubts about his transparency and trustworthiness. But Harris stood firm. There are certain things, he said, that cannot be made public. For national security reasons, some operations must remain classified. Mr. Musk has operated in a world where secrecy is paramount. That does not mean he has done anything wrong. It simply means that his work has been misunderstood. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy reached its peak. The world was captivated by the trial, and now, with Harris's testimony, the situation had taken on a new dimension. Was Elon Musk a hero, a rogue genius working in the shadows for the greater good? Or was he a pawn in a much larger game of manipulation, used by the government to achieve goals that the public couldn't understand? The public was torn. Some saw Musk as a patriot, someone who had given everything for the future of the nation. Others saw him as a puppet, a man who had been complicit in creating technologies that could be used for mass surveillance and control. Still others questioned whether Musk even knew the full extent of the projects he had been involved in. Had he been duped by government officials, or had he been the mastermind behind it all? Elon Musk was not a man with whom Elon had shared a close relationship. In fact, their relationship had always been strained, marked by years of distance, tension, and emotional conflict. Errol had been a figure of cold authority in Elon's life, often demanding perfection from his son in ways that only bred resentment. Their estranged relationship was something Musk rarely spoke of, and when he did, it was with a mix of bitterness and ambivalence. But now, as Musk unfolded the letter, he was hit with a wave of emotions. Emotions he had long buried beneath his focus on innovation, business, and global aspirations. The letter read, "Elon, I know you may not want to hear from me, but I feel the need to tell you something important before it's too late. The decisions you're making now, the path you've chosen, it's dangerous. You're playing with fire. You think you can control everything, but you can't. I've seen it happen before, and I know how this ends. Be careful. You've been lured into something much bigger than you realize. You're not just playing for the future of humanity anymore. You're playing for your own soul." Errol, the words hit Musk like a ton of bricks. His father's message, cryptic and ominous, seemed to confirm every fear he had tried to suppress over the years. Musk had always been driven by a desire to prove himself, not just to the world, but to his father. And now, this letter brought everything into sharp focus. Was Musk in control of his fate, or was he simply a pawn in someone else's game? For hours, Musk sat in his office, reflecting on the words. What had Errol meant by lured into something bigger? Who was behind this game, and why was Musk so deeply entangled in it? The answers came sooner than expected. Later that afternoon, Musk received a visitor, someone he never thought would show up in the middle of his trial. It was Dr. Walter Harris, the former CIA analyst who had testified on his behalf. Musk had never expected to see him outside the confines of the courtroom. "Mr. Musk," Harris said, his voice unusually serious, "I think it's time you understand the full scope of the situation." Musk looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Harris hesitated for a moment, his gaze shifting as if considering whether to proceed. Then he spoke in a low, deliberate tone. Musk's personal life, too, became fodder for the media. His relationships, his marriages, his children, his eccentricities, were analyzed with the same intensity as his business dealings. The public's fascination with his private life grew. Was Musk truly a misunderstood genius? Or was he a man driven by ambition, willing to sacrifice anything for success? Back in the courtroom, Musk sat in silence. His mind was racing, the pressure mounting with every passing second. The world had changed for him. His secrets were out in the open, and now there was no turning back. The truth had come to light. His connection to the CIA, his role in the larger narrative of technological dominance, everything was now public knowledge. But what did it all mean? Was he a hero, or had he simply been used as a pawn in a much larger game of power? As the trial continued, Musk realized something profound. The future was uncertain, but his journey was far from over. The case wasn't just about the accusations anymore. It was about who Musk truly was, and how the world would perceive him moving forward. The truth would have to unfold in its own time. But in that moment, Musk knew one thing for sure. The world was watching, and the stakes had never been higher. As the courtroom emptied for the day, Musk walked out into the night, surrounded by his legal team. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. What had been a simple trial had now become something much more. A global spectacle, a struggle for the future, and the ultimate test of Musk's legacy. The journey had only just begun, and no one knew what would come next. As the days went by, the trial intensified. The world had already witnessed a stunning array of twists and turns, each more shocking than the last, but nothing could prepare anyone for what happened next. Elon Musk had made it clear that he was no stranger to pressure, but the revelations coming to light were beginning to have a psychological toll. For the first time, Musk's calm demeanor started to crack. Beneath the polished exterior, there was a man who had been caught in a storm of his own making, a storm that threatened to destroy everything he had built. It all began with the letter. The morning it arrived, Musk was pacing in his private office. His lawyers had been working round the clock to prepare for the final stage of the trial, and Musk had been trying to keep himself focused on the task at hand. But then the letter came, a small, innocuous envelope, hand-delivered with a sense of urgency. The letter was addressed to Musk, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was from his father, Elon Musk. "There's more to this than you realize. The CIA's involvement with your companies wasn't just about defense contracts or technology. There's a deeper agenda at play, and it's something you've been part of for years, whether you knew it or not. The truth is, Elon, you've been operating as a conduit for a much larger network. The projects you've been involved with, SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, they're part of a grand strategy, one that goes beyond innovation. It's about control, about shaping the future in ways the public can't even begin to understand." Musk stared at Harris, his mind reeling from the implications of his words. "You're telling me this was all planned?" Musk asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Not entirely planned, but certainly orchestrated," Harris said. "You were a key player in something bigger than any of us realized. From the very beginning, your brilliance caught the attention of powerful figures. The CIA saw your potential as more than just an entrepreneur. They saw you as a tool, a means to an end." Musk felt his chest tighten, the weight of the conversation pressing down on him. "So what now? What am I supposed to do with this knowledge?" Harris sighed, his face a mixture of regret and resignation. "The truth is, you've always been one step ahead of everyone, but now you're facing forces you don't fully understand. You've always prided yourself on your independence, but you're not entirely free. There are higher stakes now, Elon. You need to choose your next move carefully." Musk sat back, overwhelmed by the magnitude of it all. For years, he had built his empire on the belief that he was forging a path toward a brighter future, one that would transcend the limitations of the present and redefine the way humanity lived and worked. But now, that vision seemed clouded by a reality he couldn't ignore. As the days passed, Musk's internal conflict deepened. In the courtroom, the stakes were higher than ever. The prosecution had prepared their final arguments, and it seemed as though the tide was turning against him. Public opinion had shifted. Even those who had once revered Musk for his ingenuity were beginning to question his motives. His reputation was on the line, and with it, the future of his companies. In the final days before the verdict, Musk realized that he was not just fighting for his freedom or his businesses. He was fighting for the very soul of his vision. Would he continue down the path of collaboration with shadowy government forces, sacrificing his ideals for the sake of security? Or would he break free from the chains that had bound him for so long, even if it meant losing everything? In the weeks that followed, the media frenzy surrounding Musk's trial only intensified. His every move was scrutinized, his words dissected, his past re-examined under a magnifying glass. Musk's companies, SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, were under intense pressure. Investors grew wary, questioning whether the man they had trusted with their capital was truly the visionary he had once appeared to be, or just a cog in a much larger and far darker machine. Public opinion fractured, with some still clinging to the hope that Musk was a misunderstood genius, while others believed he was nothing more than a fraud, a puppet controlled by unseen forces. The pressure was mounting on every front, and for the first time in years, Musk found himself questioning the very purpose of everything he had worked for. Musk's legal team worked tirelessly, appealing the verdict and preparing for the next stage of the trial. Despite the weight of the decision, Musk refused to give up. He had built his empire from nothing. He had faced adversity before, and he would face it again. But this time, the fight was different. It wasn't just about his reputation, his wealth, or his legacy. It was about the truth, and whether or not he could find it within himself to confront the darkness that had come to define his existence. The days following the guilty verdict were a blur. Musk spent his time locked in his office, sifting through old files, reviewing correspondence, and reconnecting with people from his past. He needed answers to the questions that had been haunting him for so long. How much did he really know about the forces that had shaped his career? How far had the government's influence over his businesses really gone? And most importantly, who could he trust? Then, one evening, a surprising visitor arrived. It was Greg Holloway, Musk's lead attorney, who had been by his side throughout the trial. But tonight, Holloway looked different. Tense, anxious, as if he were carrying a heavy burden. "Can we talk?" Holloway asked, his voice strained. Musk nodded, motioning for him to sit. "What's going on, Greg?" Musk asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Holloway hesitated, his eyes darting around the room as though he feared someone might be listening. The courtroom was packed for the final day of the trial. Reporters lined the walls, cameras flashed, and the air was thick with anticipation. The jury was about to deliberate, and everyone knew that this moment would determine the future of Elon Musk, his companies, his reputation, and his legacy. As Musk sat in the defendant's chair, he was no longer the man who had walked into the courtroom weeks ago. He was a man who had been forced to confront his past, his choices, and the darker truths lurking behind his public persona. The future was no longer something he could control. When the jury returned with their verdict, the room fell silent. Everyone waited, breathless, for what would come next. And then, the words were spoken. "Guilty," the foreman said. Musk's heart sank as the verdict echoed in his ears. The world around him seemed to spin, as though the ground had shifted beneath his feet. But deep down, he knew the battle wasn't over. This was just the beginning of something much bigger, a new chapter in a story that was still unfolding. The emotional climax of his trial had come, but Musk had yet to make the ultimate decision about who he would become. And as the gavel struck, the real journey was just beginning. The sound of the gavel striking echoed through the courtroom like a distant thunderclap. "Guilty." The word hung in the air, reverberating through the walls, settling into the minds of everyone present. Musk's heart pounded in his chest. The crowd's reaction was a mixture of shock, disbelief, and hushed whispers. Musk had become a symbol of both innovation and controversy, and now, the legal system had officially labeled him guilty. But the verdict, as crushing as it was, wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The room slowly emptied, but Musk remained seated in the defendant's chair, staring blankly at the empty space in front of him. His mind was a blur of conflicting emotions. For a man who had once been a pioneer of the future, leading humanity toward new frontiers, the present had suddenly become a prison, a cage of his own making. "Elon, there's something you need to know," he said quietly. "I've been going over the case, reviewing everything, trying to figure out where things went wrong. And I came across something that doesn't make sense." Musk's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "I've been looking into the connections between you and the CIA. There's more to this than we thought. A lot more. I think the agency has been running a covert operation, using your companies as fronts for something much bigger. And I'm not sure you even realized it." Musk's stomach churned. "Are you saying I've been manipulated? That everything I've built was part of some grand scheme?" Holloway nodded. "I'm afraid so. And I've been trying to get to the bottom of it. But the deeper I dig, the more I realize how deep this runs. I'm not sure who we can trust anymore. And the people who have been pulling the strings, well, they're not going to let this go easily." Musk stood up abruptly, pacing the room. His mind raced, his thoughts spinning. For years, he had believed that he was at the helm of his own destiny, that his companies were a reflection of his genius, his will to change the world. But now, the walls were closing in. The lines between truth and manipulation had become so blurred that he didn't know where one ended and the other began. "How do we stop this?" Musk asked, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and desperation. Holloway shook his head. "I don't know, Elon, but I'm afraid this is only the beginning. If we don't act fast, everything you've worked for could be destroyed." In the weeks that followed, Musk began to understand the full scope of what Holloway had hinted at. The CIA's influence over his businesses wasn't just about government contracts or defense projects. It was about control over technology, over the future, and over the very direction of humanity. Musk had unknowingly been a part of a larger plan, one that sought to shape the world in ways that were far more insidious than he could have ever imagined. But Musk wasn't ready to give up. If anything, the revelation of this hidden truth only fueled his resolve. He would find a way to take back control. He would expose the people who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes and make them accountable for their actions. And so, he began to formulate a plan to fight back. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be quick. But Musk had always been a man who thrived in the face of adversity. He had built his empire from nothing. Now, he would tear down the walls that had confined him and expose the truth to the world. The battle was just beginning. And this time, it wasn't just a legal fight. It was a fight for his soul. As the world watched Musk's every move, the stakes had never been higher. The outcome of the trial was only one piece of the puzzle. What lay ahead would shape not only Musk's future, but the future of the entire world. Would Musk emerge victorious, clearing his name and reclaiming his legacy? Or would the shadow of the CIA, and the forces behind it, consume him entirely? One thing was certain. The game had changed, and Musk had no intention of losing. The aftermath of the trial had begun, but the real war had only just begun. The days following Musk's verdict had been marked by endless meetings, strategic planning, and whispered conversations in darkened rooms. Musk was no longer just a tech mogul. He had become a man on a mission, one to uncover the truth that had been carefully concealed from the world. His desire for innovation had always been rooted in the idea of changing the world for the better, but now, he realized that his efforts had been hijacked by powerful forces beyond his control. The very technologies he had pioneered were being used to reshape humanity in ways he had never intended. He sat in a sleek conference room, the walls lined with glowing screens that displayed a web of information. Government documents, corporate records, satellite data, and intercepted communications. Every scrap of evidence was crucial in uncovering the extent of the CIA's influence. His legal team, now bolstered by a handful of covert intelligence experts, worked tirelessly to piece together the puzzle. It wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. Musk was determined to expose the machine behind the curtain, the ones who had orchestrated the events that led him here. "Are we sure about this?" Musk asked, his voice low as he leaned over a map of global corporate connections. The lines between his companies and the government had begun to appear more like strings on a puppet, and Musk was starting to realize how deeply entrenched he had become. Greg Holloway, his ever-loyal lawyer, stood beside him, nodding. "Everything we've uncovered points to a coordinated effort, Elon. Your companies weren't just incubators for new technologies. They were platforms for a much bigger agenda. The CIA's role goes far deeper than we thought." Musk ran his hands through his hair, frustration and anger bubbling to the surface. "And I was just a pawn in this game? All this time, I thought I was building something revolutionary, something that could take humanity to Mars, change the way we produce energy, and even alter the future of AI. How could I have been so blind?" "Sometimes the vision is clear," Holloway said quietly, "but it's the people who hide in the shadows that control the lens." "You've crossed a line," Harris continued. "The CIA isn't just using you. They're preparing to make an example of you. They want to send a message. They'll destroy you if they have to. You think the legal system is the battlefield? It's not. You're up against something far worse. If you don't back down, they will take you down." Musk's mind raced. This wasn't a warning, it was a threat. But Musk wasn't one to back down. He had faced setbacks before, but this was different. This wasn't just about a legal case. This was about survival. If the CIA was truly out to get him, it was clear that the stakes had been raised to a level he hadn't anticipated. "I won't back down," Musk said firmly, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through his veins. "I'm exposing the truth. I can't live with myself if I don't." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Harris spoke again, his voice softer now. "I was hoping you'd say that. But listen, Elon, you need to be careful. They won't just destroy your reputation. They'll destroy anyone who gets too close to the truth. If you really want to take them on, you need to be ready for what comes next. It won't just be a legal battle. It's going to get ugly, and you'll need allies. Real allies. People who can protect you when it all comes crashing down." Musk absorbed Harris's words, the weight of them sinking in. "I'm ready. I've always been ready." As the days went on, Musk prepared for what was to come. He knew that the risks were monumental, but he also knew that if he didn't expose the truth, he would be complicit in the very system he was fighting to destroy. The media was buzzing with rumors, and public opinion was divided. But Musk had a singular focus now, to reveal the hidden hand that had been controlling his every move. He met with a group of trusted journalists, briefing them on the details of the operation and providing them with documents that would prove his claims. They agreed to release the information in waves, carefully controlling the narrative so that it couldn't be easily discredited. The first leak went public just days later. It was a bombshell, a series of internal CIA memos that detailed the agency's involvement with Musk's companies, from the early days of Tesla and SpaceX to the covert military applications of his technologies. The documents revealed a complex network of government control, secretive agreements, and intelligence operations that had been hidden from the public for over a decade. Musk stood up and began pacing, his mind racing. "We need to go public. We can't just play defense anymore. The truth has to come out. People need to understand that this wasn't my vision. It was manipulated from the start. And if we don't expose it now, it will only get worse." With his mind set on exposing the truth, Musk knew that taking this fight public would come with tremendous risks. But it was the only way forward. The media was already in a frenzy, and Musk was no stranger to the spotlight, but this was different. This time, he wasn't just defending his own reputation. He was taking on the most powerful organization in the world. He gathered a small, trusted team of insiders, former government officials, independent journalists, and cybersecurity experts, all people who had knowledge of the operations that had been set into motion around him. Together, they began to devise a plan for releasing the information to the public. They would leak a series of documents and communications that would expose the covert operations the CIA had been running behind the scenes, using Musk's companies as the backbone for their mission. But even as Musk and his team worked relentlessly to build their case, They knew they were up against a formidable adversary. The CIA had the power to erase people, to make them disappear without a trace. Musk couldn't help but think back to the letter from his father. The warning had been cryptic, but it had been clear. There were forces far more dangerous than he had ever realized, and they weren't going to give up easily. In the middle of these preparations, another shock came from an unexpected source. One evening, Musk received a phone call, one that shook him to his core. It was from Dr. Walter Harris, the former CIA analyst who had testified during the trial, the man who had initially given Musk hope that the truth might finally be revealed. "Mr. Musk," Harris said, his voice thick with urgency, "I need to speak with you. It's not safe to continue this alone. The people you're up against are far more dangerous than you realize. They've been watching your every move, and if you don't stop now, it won't just be your legacy on the line. It'll be your life." Musk's pulse quickened. "What are you talking about, Walter?" "You've crossed a line," Harris continued. "The CIA isn't just using you. They're preparing to make an example of you. They want to send a message. They'll destroy you if they have to. You think the legal system is the battlefield? It's not. You're up against something far worse. If you don't back down, they will take you down." Musk's mind raced. This wasn't a warning, it was a threat. But Musk wasn't one to back down. He had faced setbacks before, but this was different. This wasn't just about a legal case. This was about survival. If the CIA was truly out to get him, it was clear that the stakes had been raised to a level he hadn't anticipated. "I won't back down," Musk said firmly, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through his veins. "I'm exposing the truth. I can't live with myself if I don't." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Harris spoke again, his voice softer now. "I was hoping you'd say that. But listen, Elon, you need to be careful. They won't just destroy your reputation. They'll destroy anyone who gets too close to the truth. If you really want to take them on, you need to be ready for what comes next. It won't just be a legal battle. It's going to get ugly, and you'll need allies. Real allies. People who can protect you when it all comes crashing down." Musk absorbed Harris's words, the weight of them sinking in. "I'm ready. I've always been ready." As the days went on, Musk prepared for what was to come. He knew that the risks were monumental, but he also knew that if he didn't expose the truth, he would be complicit in the very system he was fighting to destroy. The media was buzzing with rumors, and public opinion was divided. But Musk had a singular focus now, to reveal the hidden hand that had been controlling his every move. He met with a group of trusted journalists, briefing them on the details of the operation and providing them with documents that would prove his claims. They agreed to release the information in waves, carefully controlling the narrative so that it couldn't be easily discredited. The first leak went public just days later. It was a bombshell, a series of internal CIA memos that detailed the agency's involvement with Musk's companies, from the early days of Tesla and SpaceX to the covert military applications of his technologies. The documents revealed a complex network of government control, secretive agreements, and intelligence operations that had been hidden from the public for over a decade. The world went into a frenzy. The backlash was immediate. But amidst the chaos, Musk felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was finally out in the open. But this was only the beginning of what would become the most dangerous battle of his life. The CIA wasn't going to let this go easily, and they had the resources and power to crush anyone who got in their way. For Musk, there was no turning back now. The storm had arrived, and he was at the center of it. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, one thing was clear. Elon Musk was no longer just a man building a legacy. He was now the target of one of the most powerful organizations in the world. And the fight for his life, and for the truth, was just beginning. The hidden hand had been revealed. And now, Musk had to figure out how to unmask the puppeteers once and for all. The chaos following the leak was nothing short of a media frenzy. The world was now aware of the vast web of connections linking Musk's companies with the CIA. Connections that ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. News outlets were in overdrive, attempting to piece together the magnitude of the revelations. The public response was split. Some people were outraged by the apparent manipulation of Musk's vision, while others believed Musk had been a pawn in a larger game, a man who had been exploited for the sake of national security. As the storm of controversy raged on, Musk found himself in the eye of the hurricane. He had expected backlash, but the speed and intensity with which the media machine turned against him caught him off guard. His companies, once symbols of progress and innovation, were now seen as tools of an unseen, shadowy empire. It was no longer just about the guilt or innocence of a tech mogul. It was about the very nature of freedom and control in the modern world. Musk sat in his office late one night, surrounded by piles of documents and digital screens that glowed with a mix of data and encrypted files. Holloway, his lawyer, had called it the storm before the calm. But Musk wasn't so sure. It felt more like the calm before the storm, one that would test his resolve like never before. "Elon, we need to discuss next steps," Holloway said as he entered the room, his face drawn with concern. "The leak has caused a firestorm, and we've been hearing whispers. The CIA is already working behind the scenes to neutralize this. They're not just going after your reputation. They'll go after everything. Your companies, your assets, your people, even your loved ones." Musk looked at him, his eyes hardening. "I won't be intimidated. We've already put the truth out there. People have seen it. Now, it's time to turn the tide." Holloway shook his head. "It's not that simple. They're going to discredit the leak. They'll bury the sources, find ways to undermine the credibility of the documents, and if that doesn't work, they'll try to silence anyone involved. We're going to need more than just public outrage to win this fight." Musk leaned forward, his mind already working through the possibilities. "So what do? We keep pushing forward, don't we?" "Yes, but carefully. There are people we can trust, but there are also people who've been embedded with you for years who may be compromised. We need to start thinking about who can truly help us in this fight and who might be working for the other side." Musk's world had grown darker in the days since the leak. His closest allies were becoming increasingly difficult to trust. Musk had always operated with a sense of openness, believing in the loyalty of his inner circle. But the revelation of the CIA's involvement had cast a long shadow of doubt. Who had been working with him for the right reasons? And who had been playing a double game all along? He began looking over the names of those closest to him, the engineers, the executives, the people who had helped build Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink. Musk had always considered himself a visionary, a man whose ambition would reshape the world. But now he wondered how much of that vision had truly been his, and how much had been orchestrated by unseen hands, manipulating him into becoming their instrument. There were whispers in the corridors. Colleagues who had once been loyal were now acting distant, as if the weight of the revelations had shaken them to their core. But there were a few, only a few, who were standing by him, offering support in the midst of the storm. One of those few was Miranda Lee, a former cybersecurity expert for Tesla who had risen through the ranks to become one of Musk's most trusted lieutenants. She had always been a quiet but determined force behind the scenes, working to ensure the integrity of Musk's companies in a world that was growing increasingly hostile to their innovations. Miranda had always been brilliant, and Musk had relied on her for years to ensure his company's security. But now, her expertise would be needed in ways neither of them could have predicted. "Miranda, what's the word from the inside?" Musk asked, his voice grim. She paused, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one else was listening. "It's bad, Elon. I've been monitoring communications within the company, and there are signs that someone has been feeding information to the CIA, maybe even from the top ranks. There's a leak somewhere. We can't trust everyone in the organization." Musk clenched his jaw. "Do you have any idea who?" Miranda shook her head. "Not yet, but we've started tracing encrypted messages from inside the company. It's not a full-scale operation yet, but it's growing. We need to act fast. If the CIA has someone on the inside, we could lose everything." Musk stood up, his mind spinning with the weight of the situation. The people who had been his allies, the ones he had trusted, could very well be the ones betraying him now. Every move he made was under a microscope, and the stakes were higher than ever. Musk knew that if they were going to survive this fight, they needed to play smart. It wasn't enough to leak documents or release a few pieces of information. The CIA had resources, and they had the ability to manipulate the narrative. They controlled vast networks of media, intelligence, and political influence. Musk had to think bigger. The next step was clear. They needed to expose not just the CIA's involvement with Musk's companies, but the entire network of individuals and organizations that had been working together in the shadows. This wasn't just about protecting his legacy. It was about taking down the entire corrupt system. Musk and Miranda began gathering a team of operatives, hackers, journalists, and former intelligence officers who would help them infiltrate the CIA's operations. The goal was to get to the heart of the operation, to expose the players involved, and to give the public the full picture of what had been happening behind the scenes for years. Every day brought new challenges, new dangers. They were being hunted by the very people they once thought they were serving. But Musk wasn't a man to back down. He had spent his life building systems that could change the world, and now he was going to dismantle the system that had ensnared him. The real battle wasn't in the courts anymore. It was in the shadows, where truth and lies collided, and where only the brave or the desperate dared to fight. Musk had crossed the point of no return. Now, he was going to burn the shadows away, piece by piece, until nothing but the truth remained. The fight for the future of humanity had taken a darker turn, and the only way out was through. Musk's decision to take the fight directly to the CIA's shadow network marked a pivotal shift in the battle that had already begun to consume his life. Every moment felt like a step deeper into uncharted territory, where his every move could be monitored, tracked, and neutralized by forces far more powerful than he could have imagined. The team Musk had assembled was small, but it was formidable. Miranda Lee, his cybersecurity expert, had taken the lead on hacking operations, leveraging her skills to break into encrypted databases and trace any digital footprints left by the CIA's agents within his companies. There was Ethan, a former CIA operative with an impressive knowledge of covert intelligence tactics, and Maya, a journalist whose investigative reporting had once taken down corrupt government officials. Together, they were a small but mighty team, one that operated in the shadows, gathering intel, and preparing for the next move in the battle against the intelligence giant. Musk's days now revolved around covert meetings, late-night data analysis, and high-stakes decisions. The goal was no longer just to defend himself. It was to dismantle the power structure that had manipulated him and many others for years. Each move needed to be calculated, every ally scrutinized for potential betrayal. One evening, Musk stood before a large whiteboard in the war room, scribbling a web of connections between various agencies, businesses, and individuals. The dots were starting to connect, but the full picture was still unclear. "These are the key players," Musk said, pointing to a set of names. "These are the individuals who have been embedded at the highest levels of my companies, the ones feeding information back to the agency. But there's something we're missing. If they've been pulling the strings this whole time, they must have deeper access. We need to track down their connections to key political figures, private contractors, and anyone with a vested interest in the success of these technologies." Miranda nodded, tapping away at her laptop. "I'm pulling all the encrypted messages from Tesla's internal communications right now. We've already identified a few key individuals, but we need to go deeper. They've been so careful. This isn't just about us anymore, Elon. They're playing a game of chess, and we're just one of the pieces." Musk rubbed his temples, his mind overwhelmed. He'd always known that Silicon Valley was full of secrecy and backroom deals, but the depth of the CIA's involvement had shaken him to his core. The idea that his life's work was being used as part of a larger geopolitical agenda, something that had been hidden from him for so long, was a betrayal that felt personal, even if it was a product of the system he had unknowingly stepped into. "We have to be ready for anything," Musk said, his voice steady despite the tension mounting inside him. "If we're going to take this fight to them, we need more than just evidence. We need leverage. We need to make sure that if this goes public, they can't just dismiss it or cover it up." Ethan, the former CIA operative, leaned forward from his chair, looking every bit as grim as Musk felt. "We have one chance at this. We need to expose their entire network. Every contract, every covert operation, every link in the chain. But the more we expose, the more dangerous this becomes. You've already seen how the public is reacting to the leaks. Imagine what'll happen when they realize just how deep this goes." Musk nodded. "Exactly. And that's why we need to make sure the story we tell can't be denied. It's not just about proving my innocence. It's about showing the world the manipulation at play. The world has to understand that this is bigger than any one man. This is about the future of humanity and whether we want our innovations to be controlled by shadow organizations. The next phase of their plan was to gather the most incriminating evidence possible. Musk had made it clear to his team. They were no longer just fighting to clear his name. They were fighting to tear down the entire system that had been manipulating technology for decades. They would need to expose the network that had been quietly controlling global progress, using Musk's companies as leverage for covert operations, defense contracts, and political manipulation. Musk and his team spent the next few weeks combing through an array of sensitive materials, documents, financial records, contracts, and internal memos. It was painstaking work, sifting through mountains of digital data and physical files, each piece more damning than the last. One night, as Musk pored over a series of intercepted communications, his eyes narrowed at a particular email. The subject line read, "Project Blackout, Musk Assets." It was from a name Musk didn't recognize, Henry Jacobs. He clicked on the email, reading through it quickly. The contents detailed a covert operation where Tesla's energy technology had been repurposed for use in military-grade satellite systems. There was mention of secret meetings with top defense contractors, government officials, and, most chillingly, direct instructions to use Musk's technology for surveillance purposes on both foreign governments and domestic individuals. Musk felt his heart race. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was proof that his inventions had been weaponized without his knowledge, without his consent. In the quiet hours of the early morning, as the world slept, Musk sat alone in his office, his mind racing. The screen in front of him glowed with the encrypted documents he had meticulously collected over the past few weeks. Every file, every email, every memo was a piece of the puzzle. A puzzle that would shatter the carefully constructed facade of the CIA's influence over his companies and technologies. Beside him, Miranda Lee and Ethan were in the final stages of securing everything. The journalists they'd reached out to were ready, and once the information went live, it would spread like wildfire. Musk could feel the tension in the room. Everyone was on edge. They all understood the gravity of what was about to unfold. "Ready when you are, Elon," Miranda said, her voice steady but laced with anticipation. Musk looked at her, then at Ethan, before turning his gaze to the digital files. "Once we release this, there's no telling what will happen next. But we're doing the right thing." Ethan, who had been silent for most of the evening, spoke up. "It's not just about you anymore. This is about the people who've been kept in the dark for too long. The public needs to know what's really going on behind the scenes. If we don't expose this now, they'll never see the light of day." Musk nodded slowly. He had spent his entire career trying to push the boundaries of technology, aiming to shape the future of humanity. But now, he was about to expose the darker side of the very forces that had shaped his own future. It felt like a betrayal of sorts, but Musk knew it was necessary. The truth had to be known. "Let's do it," Musk said, his voice firm. With a few keystrokes, the files were released. Within minutes, the first journalist to receive the information began publishing an article on the web. It was an explosive piece, detailed, comprehensive, and damning. The headline read, "Elon Musk, the man who never knew he was working for the CIA." The article delved into the network that had quietly controlled Musk's companies for years. It outlined the connections between Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink with top government officials, defense contractors, and intelligence agencies. It laid bare the covert operations that Musk's technologies had been repurposed for, including surveillance programs, military applications, and even mind control experiments. "This is it," Musk whispered to himself. "This is the smoking gun we've been looking for." He immediately forwarded the email to Miranda and Ethan. They needed to move fast, but carefully. This piece of evidence could be the key to unraveling the entire operation, but only if they played their cards right. The following morning, Musk gathered his team for a strategy session. Miranda had already begun preparing the leak, encrypting the files and setting up secure channels for journalists who could help disseminate the information without it getting blocked or suppressed. "We've got a problem," Ethan said, cutting to the chase. "The CIA has already moved to discredit you, Elon. The first wave of leaks has already been dismissed as fabrications. We need to act fast and ensure that the story gets out in full. The longer we wait, the more they'll cover it up. Miranda nodded, her face set in determination. I've been reaching out to a few journalists I trust. They're ready to go public with this information, but it needs to come from you. The world will listen if it's you who speaks the truth. If we just release these files without a clear narrative, it'll be easy to dismiss as fake news or conspiracy. Musk took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth, the moment when everything would either come crashing down or come into the light. He had to take the risk. He had to speak out. I'm ready, he said. Let's do it. But we need to make sure that this is more than just about me. We need to show the world the depth of this corruption, the manipulation, and the hidden forces that control it. This is about taking back control, not just for me, but for everyone who has been affected by this hidden network. As the team prepared to take the next step, the stakes had never been higher. Musk knew that once the floodgates were opened, there would be no going back. But the truth had to be revealed, no matter the cost. The world needed to know the full extent of the power that had been silently shaping the course of history. And Musk was determined to be the one to expose it, once and for all. The hidden network was on the verge of being revealed, and the world would never look the same again. The world was on the edge of its seat, waiting for the next big revelation. As Musk prepared for the release of the damning documents, the weight of his decision bore down on him. He was about to expose the most powerful shadow network in modern history, and with it, the most dangerous forces he had ever faced. There was no going back now. The world's media quickly picked up the story. Social media exploded with reactions, from shock and outrage to disbelief and confusion. News outlets across the globe scrambled to confirm the authenticity of the leaked documents. Many were initially skeptical, questioning the validity of the claims. But as the details flooded in, it became clear. This was no conspiracy theory. The documents were real. The CIA had been embedded at the highest levels of Musk's companies. For Musk, the hours following the release were a blur. His phone rang incessantly, filled with calls from reporters, politicians, and business leaders, all wanting a piece of him. He ignored most of them, focusing instead on the next phase of his plan. He had to control the narrative. He sat down with Miranda and Ethan in his war room, staring at the screen as the reactions poured in. These are just the first steps, Musk said, his voice calm but unwavering. We need to take control of the message. The world needs to hear my side of the story, why I didn't know about this, why I'm not guilty of being complicit. Ethan leaned back in his chair. You're going to have to face the music, Elon. You can't hide anymore. They're going to crucify you in the media, spin it all in their favor. But if you're going to win this, you need to confront them head-on. Miranda nodded. We've already got a foundation for the public to rally behind. Now we need to amplify your message. You're not just a victim in this. You're the key to bringing it all down. People are already questioning the government's control over the tech world. This could be your chance to lead the charge. Musk took a deep breath. He knew what they were saying was true. He had to stand in front of the world and make them believe him, not just as a businessman, but as a man who had been manipulated by forces beyond his control. The truth had been revealed, but the fight was far from over. Over the next few days, Musk's life became a whirlwind of interviews, press conferences, and public statements. The media was relentless, but Musk, despite the pressure, remained calm. He refused to back down. In his first televised interview, he sat across from a well-known journalist, his posture composed but his expression serious. The camera zoomed in, capturing every detail of the moment as the world watched. So, Mr. Musk, the journalist began, you've been accused of being a pawn in a massive covert operation orchestrated by the CIA. You've said that you had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. But how do you explain your close ties to top government officials and defense contractors? Musk looked directly into the camera, his voice steady. I built my companies with the belief that technology can improve the world. I've always been open about my goals, to make life multiplanetary, to revolutionize clean energy, to help improve human consciousness. But what's happened over the years, what's been done behind my back, was beyond my control. I did not authorize the use of my technology for surveillance or military purposes. I did not sign up for this. The journalist raised an eyebrow. But you were aware of the government contracts. You've worked closely with the Department of Defense, and your companies have been involved in high-level security projects. Why didn't you see what was happening? Musk's jaw clenched, but he held his ground. I've always worked with the belief that technology should be used for the betterment of humanity. I did not know the extent to which my work was being manipulated by powerful forces. It was never my intention to be part of any secret government agenda. But now that I know, I am doing everything in my power to expose it. The interview was explosive, and the world was forced to reckon with the truth Musk had revealed. The media, now in full swing, couldn't get enough of the story. Every outlet was discussing the implications of the CIA's covert operations, and Musk's name was on the lips of every person watching. But amidst the chaos, Musk knew this was only the beginning. The truth had been set loose, but the forces behind the scenes weren't going to let this go quietly. They would push back with everything they had, just as they had before. Musk had taken the first step. Now, he was ready for the battle that would change the world forever. He wasn't just fighting for his companies anymore. He was fighting for the future of freedom, and he would do whatever it took to expose the shadow network that had tried to control him. As the world reacted to the leaked documents, the media onslaught continued. It was clear that this was just the beginning of a far larger confrontation, and Musk could already feel the storm clouds gathering once again. But this time, he wasn't running. He was ready. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Musk's mind raced. He knew Sarah was right. This wasn't just a media war. It was a battle for his very freedom. The people behind the curtain weren't going to let him go without a fight. Meanwhile, the dark web buzzed with whispers of a secret meeting happening somewhere in Washington, D.C. The CIA had assembled a team of operatives to assess the damage Musk's leak had caused, and more importantly, to figure out how to eliminate the threat he posed to their covert operations. Maya, the investigative journalist who had been working with Musk, intercepted a conversation on an encrypted channel that led her straight to the heart of the CIA's counteroffensive. It was a trail of breadcrumbs, coded messages, encrypted documents, and the names of key players involved in the damage control. But one name stood out among the rest: Henry Jacobs. Jacobs was a name Musk had come across in the documents, the CIA operative who had orchestrated the weaponization of Tesla's technology. He was listed as a key figure in the Project Blackout operations, and his involvement ran deep. Maya's investigation revealed that Jacobs had an extensive history in both military operations and intelligence gathering. It was clear that he was one of the most dangerous people Musk could face in this battle. Maya immediately reached out to Musk, alerting him to her discovery. Jacobs is your direct link to the CIA's involvement in your companies. I'm telling you, Elon, this guy is the real mastermind. If you want to take them down, you need to start with him. But he's well protected. If we're going after him, we'll need to be more strategic than ever. Musk's eyes hardened as he absorbed the news. I've already gone public, and they're trying to erase me from the narrative. If Jacobs is the mastermind, then he's the key to ending all of this. We need to expose him, but we can't go in blind. The next few days were spent devising a strategy to uncover Jacobs' every move. Miranda Lee worked tirelessly to hack into CIA databases, searching for any information on Jacobs' involvement in other covert operations. Ethan, who had once worked within the agency, used his contacts to gather intel on Jacobs' network of allies. As they dug deeper, it became apparent that Jacobs wasn't just a shadowy figure. He was connected to some of the most powerful players in Washington. He had ties to both military-industrial complexes and private contractors that had influenced major technological breakthroughs, particularly those involving Musk's own companies. It was becoming clear that Jacobs had orchestrated the entire manipulation campaign. The days following the leak were a blur of media attention, political fallout, and growing public outrage. But the initial shock soon gave way to something darker: a swift and calculated counterattack from the forces Musk had just exposed. The media, once ravenous for the truth, began to shift. Mainstream outlets, many of which were directly or indirectly connected to the same elite power structures Musk had just dismantled, began running stories that painted him as a liability, a delusional conspiracy theorist with an inflated ego. Skeptical voices began to emerge, questioning Musk's credibility and accusing him of fabricating the entire scandal to cover up his own personal failures. Elon Musk, the man who lost control, screamed one headline, insinuating that his empire had crumbled under the weight of his unchecked ambitions. But it wasn't just the media that turned against Musk. Behind the scenes, his network of allies, those within his own companies, political circles, and business partnerships, began to fracture. High-profile executives at Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink started stepping down, distancing themselves from Musk as if he were radioactive. Some claimed they had been unaware of the covert operations, while others hinted that they were following orders and had no choice but to cooperate with government interests. It was a calculated move designed to distance themselves from the fallout while throwing Musk under the bus. But it didn't end there. Musk's legal team, which had once been among the most respected in Silicon Valley, was now under intense scrutiny. The company's attorneys were being pressured by powerful figures to drop Musk as a client or face repercussions. Musk's lawyer, a brilliant strategist named Sarah Reynolds, met with him in private for the first time since the public storm had hit. "Elon," Sarah began, her tone measured but grim, "they're coming after you from every angle. The leaks were just the start. Now they're going after your financial backing, your patents, your ability to do business at all. There's a very real possibility that they could strip you of your companies if they can prove you were in on this covert agenda." Musk leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming on the desk. "They can't do that. They can't just rewrite the story to fit their narrative. Not after everything that's come out." "That's not how this works, Elon," Sarah responded, her voice low. "The agencies involved have an immense amount of power and influence. They're going to try to bury this, discredit you, and erase all evidence that can't be silenced. Your only hope now is to prove that you were not complicit, that this was all orchestrated behind your back. But you need concrete evidence, and you need it fast." But just as they were closing in on Jacobs, the CIA made its move. The team received an encrypted message from a high-ranking contact, warning them that their operations had been compromised. Their safehouses were being raided, their communications monitored. Musk's phone line had been tapped. The message was clear. The CIA was onto them, and the clock was ticking. "You can't trust anyone now," Ethan said, his voice tight with urgency. "They're going to do everything they can to stop us from exposing them. If we don't act now, they'll have us all silenced." Musk paced back and forth in the war room, the weight of the situation pressing down on him like a vice. He knew the stakes had escalated. His life was no longer just under attack. It was in danger. "Prepare to move," Musk ordered. "We need to take down Jacobs, and we need to do it before he can make his next move. We're not just fighting for my companies anymore. We're fighting for the truth, for everyone who's been controlled by these shadow networks." This ends now. As the team scrambled to execute their plan, the world outside continued to reel from the fallout of Musk's revelations. What had started as a personal battle was now a global war, one that would determine the future of technology, privacy, and power. The forces Musk had set in motion were too big to ignore, and soon, the battle for truth would reach its final, most dangerous chapter. The counterattack had begun, and Musk was ready to face it head-on. The hours dragged on as Musk and his team prepared for the most critical operation of their lives. They knew they were up against the clock. The CIA had mobilized its full resources to protect their secrets, and the deeper they dug into Jacobs' activities, the more dangerous the situation became. But Musk wasn't backing down now, not after everything he had exposed. He was about to take the fight to them, to infiltrate the very heart of the CIA's operations. Musk, Miranda, Maya, and Ethan gathered in the war room. A large whiteboard displayed photos, diagrams, and connections, a complex map of Jacobs' operations. Musk stood before the board, staring at the web of intelligence and covert military operations. "Jacobs is no longer just a shadow," Musk said, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. "We've tracked his movements, his ties to the Department of Defense, his involvement in the latest classified weapons projects. This man has too much power for us to just expose him. We need to bring him down before he destroys us all." Miranda nodded, her face serious. "We've got a lead on his whereabouts. He's been meeting with high-ranking defense officials in a secure location just outside D.C. If we're going to move, this is our chance. Maya adjusted her laptop and added, the location is a private facility, off the radar for most of the public. It's a black site, heavily guarded. But there's a weakness in their security. There's a back entrance, one that hasn't been upgraded with the latest surveillance tech. Musk listened closely, formulating his plan. We'll use that entrance. We'll need to move fast and get in without making a sound. Ethan, can you get us in? Ethan, who had once been an insider with the CIA, gave a determined look. I know the layout of that facility. I'll get you inside. But once we're in, we're on our own. No backup, no way to communicate with the outside world. Then we'll do it quickly, Musk said, glancing at his team. The truth has to be revealed. No more games. The team spent the next several hours gathering gear and preparing for the mission. As night fell over Washington, they set out for the black site. It was a covert operation that would put them all in immediate danger, but they were past the point of no return. The facility was isolated, nestled in a remote part of the woods on the outskirts of the city. Tall security fences surrounded it. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, and cameras were mounted at every possible angle. It felt like a fortress designed to keep out the world, but to Musk and his team, it was the key to exposing everything. They approached the entrance, using the cover of darkness. The back door was guarded by a single, distracted guard, but Ethan knew exactly how to take care of it. In a matter of seconds, the guard was incapacitated, and the team moved inside, quiet as shadows. Musk's heart raced as he led the way, navigating through the dark corridors with practiced precision. The air inside the facility felt dense, charged with the anticipation of what was to come. They passed by security checkpoints and guards, narrowly avoiding detection with every step. Finally, they reached a door labeled, Secure Operations, the last line of defense before they could confront Jacobs. It was here that Musk's gut clenched with a mix of fear and determination. They were about to breach the inner sanctum of the very operation he had been unknowingly part of. Ethan moved forward, inputting a code into the keypad. The door clicked open, and they slipped inside. Inside the room, Jacobs sat alone, surrounded by files and surveillance monitors. He was speaking on the phone with someone, his voice low but authoritative. It's already done. He'll never be a threat again. Once we make sure that the media narrative sticks, the public will have forgotten this whole mess in a matter of weeks, Jacobs said, his tone cold. He leaned back in his chair, glancing over the intelligence reports in front of him. Musk's blood ran cold. Jacobs had already planned their next move. He wasn't just trying to contain the damage from the leak. He was planning something far worse. Does he know who we really are? A voice crackled over the phone. No. He's too focused on his own ego to understand the bigger picture. By the time he realizes the full extent of his involvement, it'll be too late. Musk clenched his fists, rage boiling inside him. Jacobs had orchestrated the manipulation of his companies, the covert CIA operations, and now he was planning to neutralize him for good. This was it. Musk's moment of reckoning. With a quiet motion, Ethan signaled the team to move. They stepped out from the shadows. Jacobs, Musk's voice cut through the tense air, sharp as a blade. Jacobs whipped around in his chair, his eyes widening with a mixture of surprise and fear. For a moment, he said nothing. His hand hovered over the desk, clearly ready to hit the emergency alert button. But before he could react, Ethan stepped forward, blocking the exit. You won't escape this time, Musk said, his voice unwavering. You've manipulated my work, my companies, and my life. Now, you're going to answer for it. Jacob's face twisted into a sneer. You think you can stop this? You have no idea how deep this goes. You were just a pawn in a much bigger game. Musk's eyes narrowed. I'm done being anyone's pawn. Jacobs stood, his hand slowly reaching for a concealed weapon under the desk. But before he could draw it, Maya stepped forward, her eyes flashing with resolve. In one swift motion, she disarmed him, taking the gun and tossing it aside. You're not in control anymore, Maya said, her voice hard. Jacobs looked defeated for the first time, his shoulders slumping. You think you've won? The machine is already in motion. You've only delayed the inevitable. Musk stepped closer, his gaze never leaving Jacobs. Not anymore. We're taking you down. And when we're done, the world will know everything. They'll know how you used my companies to advance your own agenda, how you controlled the narrative, and how you've tried to silence the truth. Jacob's expression shifted to one of panic. You don't understand what you're dealing with. You're up against the most powerful people in the world. They'll stop at nothing to protect themselves. I'm ready for that fight, Musk said. And so is the world. As Jacobs was handcuffed and led out of the room, Musk stood tall. This was the beginning of the end for the shadow network that had controlled his life. The final battle was on the horizon, and nothing would stop him from exposing the truth. The team moved quickly, securing all the data Jacobs had been keeping hidden. It was more than just evidence. It was the key to unraveling the CIA's far-reaching operations. This was no longer just a fight for Musk's freedom. This was a battle for the future of humanity itself. The world would never be the same again. With Jacobs in their custody and the crucial intelligence secured, the team had won their first significant victory. But that was only the beginning. The battle wasn't over. The CIA and its allies still controlled vast resources, and their reach extended far beyond the walls of the black site. Musk knew the next step was the most critical, making the truth public and ensuring that the forces arrayed against him couldn't suppress it. They retreated to a safe house in the mountains, far from the prying eyes of the government. Musk and his team were in constant motion, carefully reviewing the documents they had taken from Jacobs' office, preparing a plan to release the information to the world. For days, the group worked tirelessly. Miranda and Maya pored over the data, cross-referencing every file to ensure its authenticity and relevance. Ethan used his connections to compile a network of whistleblowers and journalists who could amplify the story, ensuring that it would break through the layers of censorship and media control. Musk, meanwhile, crafted a statement, carefully choosing his words. The stakes were too high to make any mistakes. The world had already been rocked by the initial leak, but this next step would be explosive. Musk wasn't just releasing documents. He was revealing the truth about the covert operations, the manipulation of his companies, and the CIA's involvement in shaping global technology and politics. It was more than an exposé. It was a declaration of war against those who had been pulling the strings in the shadows. As the day of the reveal approached, the tension was palpable. In a room dimly lit by the glow of computer screens, Musk sat alone, staring at the file on his laptop. The documents were laid out before him, meticulously organized, each one a damning piece of evidence. The hours of investigation had culminated in this moment. He knew that releasing this information would put him in even greater danger, but there was no turning back now. Maya walked into the room, holding a secure satellite phone. We're ready. The platform is set. All we need is your final go-ahead. Musk closed his eyes, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. The world had already seen glimpses of the conspiracy, but this was the truth. Every single piece of it. He exhaled sharply and looked up at her. Do it. We can't wait any longer. The moment the information hit the internet, it was like an explosion. The details about Project Blackout, the covert operations disguised as national security initiatives, and the use of Musk's companies for surveillance and military applications spread across every major news outlet. The files revealed how the CIA had embedded agents within Musk's organizations, manipulating research and development to serve their own agendas. It detailed the extent of their reach, from high-level government officials to private contractors, and the complex web of financial and technological control they had built over decades. The world's reaction was immediate. The media frenzy that followed was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Some outlets called it the greatest corporate espionage scandal in modern history, while others labeled Musk a hero for standing up to the entrenched powers that had controlled the narrative for so long. Social media exploded with outrage, with millions of people across the globe sharing the documents, condemning the corruption, and demanding accountability. Protesters took to the streets in major cities, holding signs that read, "Expose the truth," and "End the shadow government." It was clear. The floodgates had opened, and the public was no longer willing to accept the manipulation they had been subjected to. But as expected, the establishment fought back. Politicians, intelligence agencies, and corporate interests that had been exposed in the documents quickly moved to discredit Musk and the revelations. They labeled the documents fabricated and dangerous, calling for censorship and declaring Musk a national security threat. The very institutions Musk had once worked alongside now sought to bury him, just as they had done with so many others before him. A week later, Musk stood before a live-streamed press conference, his face calm but resolute. The weight of the world seemed to rest on his shoulders. Behind him, the camera zoomed in on a large screen that displayed the most explosive parts of the leaked documents. The world was watching. "Let me be clear," Musk began, his voice steady but unwavering. "What I've shown you is the truth. For too long, powerful institutions have manipulated public perception, controlled technologies, and hidden their covert operations behind a veil of secrecy. They've used companies like mine for their own purposes, whether it's to create weapons of war or monitor the lives of innocent people. And they've done it with the full support of government agencies that should be protecting us, not controlling us." The room fell silent as Musk continued, his words carrying the weight of a man who had everything to lose. "I didn't choose to expose these truths, but I couldn't sit back any longer and let people continue to be misled. The truth about Project Blackout is just the beginning. There are more secrets, more agendas, more manipulation at play. And if you think that this is the only conspiracy in the world, then you're only scratching the surface. This isn't just about me or my companies. This is about everyone. This is about all of us who are living in a world that has been shaped by forces we can't even begin to understand." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "It's time for change, and that starts with the truth." The fallout was swift and severe. Governments around the world scrambled to respond, issuing official condemnations of Musk and his actions. In the United States, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle called for investigations into the leaks, accusing Musk of treason and threatening criminal charges. But it was too late. Too many people now knew the truth. The tide had turned. In Washington, power brokers whispered in darkened corridors, furious at the revelations and the public outcry. Musk had disrupted the status quo, and they would do everything in their power to shut him down. But Musk had one advantage. He had already exposed their secrets. The world was no longer in the dark, and that meant the fight for the future of freedom, transparency, and power had only just begun. As Musk left the press conference, he knew that the real battle was just starting. This wasn't about money or influence anymore. It was about something much bigger, changing the course of history and ensuring that the people, not the powerful elite, would have control over their own future. The revolution had begun. The news of Musk's expose sent shockwaves through the corridors of power. Every corner of the establishment, the political elite, the military-industrial complex, and the intelligence agencies, was reeling from the truth being dragged into the light. But as expected, they didn't go down quietly. The response to Musk's brave revelations was swift and brutal. Within hours of his press conference, the government announced the beginning of a full-scale investigation into the leak. Musk, now labeled a national security threat, was placed under heightened surveillance. His companies were scrutinized like never before, with regulatory bodies from around the world conducting emergency audits of Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink. In some countries, including the US, they were even threatening to revoke licenses and halt operations, accusing Musk of jeopardizing global security. It wasn't just the government that turned against him. A wave of high-profile businesses, tech moguls, and former allies distanced themselves from Musk in the wake of the scandal. CEOs who had once celebrated Musk's revolutionary ideas were now scrambling to protect their own interests. Investors pulled out of Tesla, pushing its stock price into freefall. Even SpaceX faced uncertainty, as satellite contracts were suddenly delayed or canceled under the guise of national security concerns. Neuralink, once seen as the frontier of human-computer interface technology, found itself under a microscope as potential collaborations and investors balked at being tied to Musk's name. Musk had expected pushback, but the ferocity of the retaliation caught him off guard. They were playing for keeps. They wanted him gone, removed from the public eye, stripped of his influence, and buried beneath the weight of fabricated accusations. But Musk wasn't about to back down. At his private compound, Musk gathered his core team, Miranda, Maya, Ethan, and a few trusted allies who had stayed loyal despite the pressure. They sat around a table covered with documents and digital screens, trying to stay ahead of the powerful forces now closing in on them. "They're coming for us on every front," Miranda said, her eyes tired but focused. "Tesla's under attack. SpaceX is being ground to a halt. They're pulling every legal string to put us out of business." Musk leaned back in his chair, his mind working at a mile a minute. "This is exactly what they want. They want to destroy my companies, shut us down, and make an example out of me. If they can silence me, they think they can silence the truth." Ethan, ever the realist, spoke up. "They've got the power, Elon. This isn't just some corporate brawl. The CIA and the military-industrial complex have vast influence. We're fighting a shadow war now. The real battle won't be on the stock market or in the courtrooms. It'll be in the information space. They've got the media, the political backing, and the global networks." Musk nodded. "I know, but we have something they don't, the truth. And we have the people. We've already seen the groundswell of support. Ordinary people aren't going to back down just because the government tells them to." Miranda put a hand on the table, steadying herself. "The people are waking up, but we're running out of time. If they can't discredit you, they'll make it personal. They'll go after you, your family, anyone connected to you." Musk's eyes flicked over to Maya, who had been quiet until now. She was typing quickly on her laptop, her face grim. "There's something I found," Maya said, her voice low. "We've been focusing on Jacobs and the CIA, but there's a deeper layer to all of this. Someone higher up in the food chain has been pulling the strings even before Jacobs, an individual who orchestrated the entire plan to manipulate your companies. This person's network is much larger than Jacobs and spans decades. They've been setting the stage for this moment for a long time." Everyone in the room went still. Musk felt the blood drain from his face. "Who is it?" Maya's fingers hovered over the keys before she turned the screen toward him. A name flashed across the screen. "William Carter." "I've seen that name before," Musk said, frowning. "Carter is an old family friend. He worked with me early on in the development of Tesla. But I haven't heard from him in years." Maya shook her head. "He's not just a friend. He's deep in the intelligence community. More importantly, he's been the architect behind Project Blackout. He was the one who planted the CIA operatives in your companies, and he's the one who's orchestrating the smear campaign against you now." Musk's mind spun. Carter had been a mentor, a confidant back when he was just starting out. But now it was clear. He had been playing a long con. Musk had no idea how deep Carter's betrayal went, but he knew one thing for sure. Carter had always been more than just a business associate. He had been a key player in shaping Musk's future, manipulating it from the shadows. Carter had proven to be elusive, a ghost who seemed to know Musk's every move before he made it. It was clear that Carter had anticipated Musk's retaliation, and with his vast resources, he had been orchestrating a counteroffensive that was both sophisticated and ruthless. Musk sat in front of a screen in his secure command center, surrounded by his team. Ethan was scouring encrypted files, Miranda was working on strategies to counter the government's disinformation campaign, and Maya was tracking down the last leads on Carter's location. "We're getting closer," Maya said, eyes fixed on her screen. "I've traced Carter's movements to a private estate just outside of London. He's been there for weeks, coordinating with several high-ranking figures in the intelligence community. It's heavily guarded, but if we move quickly, we might be able to intercept him before he vanishes again." Musk nodded. "We can't afford to waste time. The longer he stays hidden, the stronger his network becomes. We need to act now." The team moved swiftly. They didn't have the luxury of time. By the time they boarded the private jet that would take them to London, Musk's mind was already racing ahead. Every plan had a weakness, every move could be countered, but he had to trust in his team. They had been through hell and back, and now they were more determined than ever to bring down the very system that had tried to destroy them. As the plane took off into the night sky, Musk sat alone in a corner of the cabin, reflecting on everything that had led up to this moment. He had always believed that innovation could change the world. But now, he was beginning to realize that sometimes, to change the world, you had to confront the very systems that tried to suppress it. He thought about his family, his children, and the world he was trying to protect. His own legacy had been twisted, manipulated by powerful forces that had shaped his destiny without his knowledge. But no more. He had spent years building his empire, and now he would spend every ounce of energy dismantling the corrupt forces that threatened to tear it apart. As the plane flew over the Atlantic, his thoughts were interrupted by Maya, who came over to him. "We've got a lead," she said. "I just intercepted a secure communication. Carter is expecting us. He knows we're coming." Musk's eyes narrowed. "Then he's underestimated us. We're not just coming for him. We're going to expose everything." "If Carter is behind this," Musk said, his voice tight, "then it's personal. He's been pulling my strings the entire time. We need to find him, expose him, and shut him down." The following days were a blur of investigation, careful planning, and mounting pressure. Musk's team scrambled to gather everything they could on Carter's background and his connections within the intelligence community. But every time they thought they were getting closer, Carter's network would cover their tracks. He was always one step ahead, and every door they opened led to another maze of misinformation and dead ends. Meanwhile, the public sentiment was shifting. The media storm was still raging, but the tide was turning against Musk's enemies. More and more whistleblowers came forward, sharing their stories of corruption and manipulation within the CIA and the government. Anonymous leaks from high-ranking officials began circulating, confirming Musk's accusations and painting a disturbing picture of how deeply the intelligence community had infiltrated global corporations and political systems. Still, the clock was ticking. With each passing day, the government's retaliation grew more intense. Musk's team received credible threats, and a few of their allies had gone into hiding after suspicious visits from government agents. Every step they took felt like they were being watched. The stakes were higher than ever. Musk knew that finding Carter wasn't just about revenge. It was about ending the cycle of manipulation and secrecy once and for all. He had to confront Carter directly, expose him to the world, and prove once and for all that the system could no longer operate in the shadows. But to do that, Musk needed more than just evidence. He needed leverage, and he needed to act quickly before Carter could fully consolidate his power again. In a final act of desperation, Musk made a decision. He would not just wait for Carter to come to him. He would go on the offensive. He'd take the fight directly to the heart of the operation. He wasn't just fighting for his companies anymore. He was fighting for his legacy, for his freedom, and for the future of the world. The war was about to escalate. Musk's resolve hardened as he prepared to confront William Carter. The stakes were higher than ever before. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. He wasn't just up against an enemy. He was facing a system, a sprawling, clandestine network of power, control, and manipulation that had been running for decades. The CIA had been pulling the strings from the shadows, using his companies to manipulate technologies and innovations for their own gain. Now, it was time for Musk to turn the tables. But to do so, he needed to get to Carter, fast. Musk and his team infiltrated the estate under the cover of darkness. Ethan used his knowledge of covert operations to disable the security systems, while Maya and Miranda provided overwatch, ensuring that no one could alert Carter to their presence. As they crept closer to the main building, Musk's heart raced. He could feel the gravity of the situation bearing down on him. This was it. This was the moment that could make or break everything. They reached Carter's private office, a heavily secured room inside the mansion. Musk looked around, then nodded to Ethan, who swiftly picked the lock. They entered, and Musk felt a surge of both anger and anticipation. Everything he had been through, every betrayal, every falsehood that had been hurled his way, all of it had led him to this room. And then, there he was, William Carter. Carter was sitting behind a massive oak desk, surrounded by files and encrypted communications. He looked up slowly as the door opened, his expression betraying no surprise, only a knowing calm. "You're here," Carter said, his voice smooth. "I've been expecting you." Musk stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "You've underestimated me, Carter. You thought you could control me, manipulate me, use me as your puppet. But no more. The truth is out, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Carter's lips curled into a smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You think you've won? Do you really believe that exposing me will destroy everything? This system is bigger than you, Elon. You can't bring it down." Musk leaned in, his voice colder than ever. I don't need to bring down the whole system. I just need to take you down. And once you're gone, the rest will fall apart. You'll never hide in the shadows again. With that, Musk activated the plan. Maya sent out the encrypted files, Miranda coordinated with trusted media outlets, and Ethan secured the last pieces of evidence. The moment Carter's secrets hit the internet, the foundation of his empire began to crack. The war was now in full swing, and this time, there was no turning back. Hours later, the jet touched down on a private runway in London, and the team was quickly whisked away to a safe house located miles outside the city. It was an inconspicuous, old mansion, nestled in a valley, surrounded by dense forest. The estate where Carter was holed up was just a few miles away, heavily secured with high-tech surveillance, armed guards, and motion detectors. But Musk had a plan. "I've been thinking," Musk said, his voice low as the team gathered around the table in the safe house. "Carter has no idea how much we know about his operations. He thinks we're going to follow the breadcrumbs, track him down in some dramatic confrontation. But we need to take a different approach." Miranda looked at him. "What do you have in mind?" "We need to hit him where it hurts," Musk said, his voice firm. "We're not just going to confront him directly. We're going to destroy his entire network." Ethan, who had been quiet for a moment, spoke up. "That's going to be hard to do without putting ourselves in even more danger. Carter's network is massive, and he has people everywhere. If we move too recklessly, it'll backfire." Musk stood, pacing the room. "We have to be smart. We have to use what we know about him and his operations to our advantage. Carter is hiding behind his resources. He thinks he's invincible because of his connections. But the reality is, his operation depends on secrecy. If we can expose him, if we can take away his ability to operate in the shadows, he loses everything." Maya nodded, understanding Musk's strategy. "You're right. If we leak all the intel we have on him, his connections, his operations, and his shady dealings, it'll leave him vulnerable. The network will collapse in on itself." "We'll need to time it perfectly," Musk said. "We take him down, and we make sure the world knows exactly what he's been doing. We expose his deepest secrets, and in doing so, we cut off his support system." The team made their move that night. They had gathered enough intel to know where Carter would be, and they knew his routines. He was meticulous, always keeping to a strict schedule, never straying from the security protocols he had set up for himself. The moment the files containing Carter's deepest secrets hit the internet, chaos erupted. The explosive nature of the revelations sent shockwaves through the global media, political, and intelligence communities. The files detailed everything, from Carter's deep ties to shadow organizations within the government to his manipulations of global markets, tech, and even military operations. It was more than a leak. It was the unmasking of a dark empire that had been pulling strings for decades. Musk sat back, watching the chaos unfold on the screens before him. The initial reactions were as he'd expected: denial, outrage, and attempts to cover up the truth. The powers that had supported Carter, who had protected him for so long, were scrambling to suppress the information, calling for censorship and dismissing the revelations as fabrications or deepfake conspiracies. But it was too late. The files were out. They had already been downloaded, shared, and stored in the cloud, accessible to anyone with the will to look. The media, despite their initial resistance, had no choice but to report on it. Skepticism melted away as more and more whistleblowers and insiders came forward, confirming the truth of Musk's exposé. As expected, the first waves of backlash were directed at Musk personally. Accusations of betrayal and conspiracy theorist were thrown at him from every corner of the establishment. Powerful politicians, CEOs, and intelligence agents began to mobilize, denouncing Musk as a traitor and calling for his arrest. The mainstream media, once cautious in its reporting, quickly turned against him, parroting the narrative pushed by those in power. But in the streets, it was a different story. Protests erupted across the globe, from New York to Berlin, from Tokyo to Sydney. People had been waiting for a leader to expose the darkness they knew had been lurking just beneath the surface. They were no longer willing to trust the system. They had seen the truth, and they demanded justice. Signs read, "Expose the corruption," "Take down the shadow government," and "We stand with Musk." The public's response was clear. They had had enough of the lies. Inside the safe house, Musk and his team watched the unfolding media frenzy with a mix of satisfaction and caution. Despite the wave of support, they knew the war was far from over. Carter's network, though shaken, was still powerful. Musk's enemies wouldn't go down without a fight. And the closer they got to taking down Carter, the more dangerous the game became. "This is bigger than we thought," Miranda said, her voice low. "Carter's reach goes further than we realized. There are people still loyal to him, people in high places who will stop at nothing to protect him. We can't let our guard down." Musk nodded. "We've exposed the truth. Now we need to finish it. Carter can't be allowed to escape. He'll do whatever it takes to regain control, even if it means taking us all down with him." Ethan was already scanning encrypted channels for any sign of retaliation. "There's talk of a counteroffensive. The CIA's not just going to sit back and let us do this. We'll need to be ready for anything." Maya, who had been focused on a screen, looked up with concern. "We've underestimated one thing. Carter has more than just operatives. He has an army of loyalists in the tech world. He's already putting out feelers, trying to rally support, promising that he'll take down Musk and those who've helped him." Musk's jaw tightened. "He won't win this fight. We've already won. The world knows the truth, and they won't let it be buried. But he's right about one thing. He won't go down without trying to drag us with him." Late that night, the first signs of retaliation hit. A cyber attack took down Tesla's internal networks, disrupting operations globally. SpaceX's communication systems were hacked, and a string of false reports claiming Musk had been arrested began circulating. The disinformation campaign had begun in full force. Musk's team quickly sprang into action. "We need to restore the truth," Miranda said. "If we don't get control of this narrative now, they'll turn the public back against us." Maya had already set up a secure communications line to broadcast the truth directly to the people. "I've got a message from Musk ready to go. It's time to take this fight to them. No more hiding." Musk looked around at his team. "We're not just going to fight back. We're going to go on the offensive. I'm going to speak to the world. And this time, I won't just be talking about the truth. I'll be exposing the corruption and betrayal that goes all the way to the top." The live stream was set. Musk's face appeared on screens across the world, his voice calm yet resolute. Behind him, a backdrop of images, footage of protests, leaked documents, and key moments from the exposé, flashed across the screen. "I've always believed in the power of innovation," Musk began, his tone steady. "But innovation means nothing if it's used to control people. The truth is simple. For too long, powerful forces have been using companies like mine to manipulate the world for their own gain. They've manipulated governments, controlled markets, and monitored our every move. And I'm not the only one they've targeted. They've been doing this for decades." Musk leaned forward, his mind already working on the next step. "Carter's not just a figurehead. He's a part of a much larger network. It's a system that operates on secrecy, control, and fear. We've taken the first blow, but we need to keep the pressure on. Every day we wait, he regains strength." Ethan, ever the strategist, nodded. "We've already seen the first signs of resistance. The CIA is starting to take action. They're covering their tracks, attacking our infrastructure, and framing us for things we didn't do. They've even started leaking misinformation about me, calling me unstable and claiming I've gone rogue. They're turning the narrative back in their favor." Musk's jaw clenched. "We've got to counter that. The people are on our side, but they need more than just information. They need leadership, a clear vision of what we stand for and where we're going. The truth can't just be the foundation of our movement. It has to be the driving force. We can't afford to be passive." Maya spoke up, her face illuminated by the glow of her laptop screen. "The tech world is already shifting. People who were previously too scared to speak out are starting to come forward. We're seeing tech CEOs, some we didn't even know were involved, beginning to distance themselves from Carter's operations. But we need to make sure they know we're not just exposing corruption. We're going to rebuild this system, not just tear it down." Musk nodded. "We'll need allies on the inside. People who can work with us to ensure that Carter's network can't recover. We also need to double down on spreading the truth, not just about Carter, but about the global system that allowed him to rise in the first place." This is bigger than one man. It's about the way the system has been rigged. As the team continued their discussions, the news began to shift again. While the leaks had initially caused a storm, the true extent of the power struggle was becoming clear. Governments were scrambling to respond, world leaders were meeting behind closed doors, and international organizations like the UN were calling emergency sessions to address the crisis. But in the midst of the confusion and the efforts to maintain control, one thing was becoming increasingly clear. The people were no longer willing to accept the status quo. It was as if a veil had been lifted from their eyes. They were starting to see the true scale of the corruption, and they were no longer content to sit idly by. He paused, making direct eye contact with the camera. You've all seen the documents. You've seen the evidence. And if you still don't believe me, look at what's happening right now. The government, the media, the corporate elites, they're all trying to silence me. They're trying to bury the truth. But you, the people, have the power. And together, we're not going to let them win. He continued, his voice growing stronger with every word. Carter thought he could control me, that he could control you. But we've taken back the power. We've exposed the system for what it really is. And no matter what they do, no matter how many times they try to turn us against each other, the truth is out. The people will never go back to the way things were. As Musk's speech concluded, the world seemed to hold its breath. For the first time, the battle between Musk and his enemies was being fought on the global stage. The media, despite their initial resistance, began to change their tone, reporting on the magnitude of the crisis. The public was waking up, and they were demanding action. But Carter was not one to back down. Musk knew that exposing him was just the first part of the battle. The real war was about to begin. The fight for the future, for freedom, and for control of a world on the brink of massive change. The game was no longer just about taking down one man. It was about taking down an entire system, and the fight had only just begun. The collapse of Carter's empire was inevitable, but what would rise in its place was still uncertain. In the hours following Musk's live broadcast, the world was engulfed in a whirlwind of reactions. Headlines blared across every major news outlet. Elon Musk exposes global conspiracy. CIA and the secret tech empire. The shocking truth revealed. Social media platforms exploded with hashtags like #MuskRevolution and #EndTheCorruption, as people everywhere began to discuss the ramifications of the exposé. But despite the overwhelming support from the masses, Musk knew better than to think his mission was over. The battle was just beginning. Inside the safe house, Musk and his team gathered around a large table, analyzing the fallout. They had succeeded in exposing Carter's deep ties to covert organizations, but now came the hard part: how to dismantle the entire system before it could regroup and retaliate. "We've hit them hard," Miranda said, flipping through reports from their global allies who had helped distribute the leaked data. "But we're dealing with a hydra here. For every person we expose, it feels like 3 more pop up to take their place." Days passed, and Musk's team worked tirelessly, leveraging their network of allies to further spread the truth. They coordinated with journalists, whistleblowers, and activists to get the word out. Every new leak, every new detail added to the growing mountain of evidence that Carter and his allies had been manipulating the world for years. But it wasn't just about information anymore. It was about action. Musk knew that without direct, disruptive action, Carter's network would find a way to adapt, find new ways to infiltrate and control. They needed to destabilize the system, not just expose it. Late one night, Musk gathered his core team in the safe house. Their faces were tired, but there was a new resolve in their eyes. Musk looked around at the faces of those who had stood by him through thick and thin. "We're at a crossroads," he began, his voice steady but resolute. "The truth is out, and the world is waking up. But Carter and his supporters aren't just going to roll over. We've got one chance to strike, and we need to hit them where it hurts most." He paused, looking at each of them. "We need to take control of the narrative completely. And to do that, we need to expose every single one of Carter's accomplices, by name, by action, by their involvement in this entire charade." Miranda nodded. "That's a massive undertaking. The network is everywhere, Elon. But if we start pulling on those threads, if we expose just one corrupt official or corporate ally, We can make the whole thing unravel. Musk's eyes hardened. Exactly. We start with Carter, but we end with the system. And we can't just do it by leaking files or broadcasting messages. We need a revolution, one that can't be ignored. The team set to work, organizing a series of coordinated strikes against Carter's operation. They developed a plan to infiltrate Carter's high-security vaults, not just to steal more information, but to leave a digital trail of breadcrumbs, leading to his associates. They targeted key figures, CIA operatives, politicians, corporate moguls, all of whom were complicit in Carter's scheme. Each piece of information they gathered, each expose they published, would weaken the network even further. Maya's team hacked into one of Carter's most secure systems, gaining access to encrypted communications that were crucial for revealing the true extent of the conspiracy. Ethan worked with underground hackers and activists to begin broadcasting the information in real time, making sure every leak hit the internet in rapid succession. The first major wave came just hours later, as Musk's team released a series of high-profile documents revealing connections between Carter's group and top officials in the CIA. The backlash was immediate. The media went into overdrive, and the pressure mounted on every high-ranking official who had been named. The dominoes started to fall. By the time Carter realized what was happening, it was too late. His allies, once loyal, began to abandon him. In the face of overwhelming public outrage and legal action, his empire began to crumble. And while Musk knew that the fight was far from over, there was no denying it. Carter's network was collapsing. The world was no longer willing to stay silent. Musk sat back in his chair, watching the world shift in real time. The revolution was not just a dream anymore. It was happening, and no matter how hard they tried to stop it, nothing could change the fact that the people had awoken. They would never return to the way things were. Now, it was time to finish what they had started. As the days turned into weeks, the momentum behind Musk's movement only grew stronger. The world had tasted the truth, and it was hungry for more. Each piece of evidence, each newly exposed secret, chipped away at Carter's empire. But while the world watched, anxiously awaiting the collapse of a system that had controlled so much for so long, Musk knew the final push was still ahead. Carter, though reeling, was not finished. Musk paced back and forth in the safe house, deep in thought. His mind was racing with strategies, analyzing every possibility. They had won many battles, but the war was far from over. Carter had a vast network of supporters who would stop at nothing to protect what he had built. If they didn't strike decisively, Carter would reassemble his forces, plot his revenge, and rebuild. The stakes were higher than ever. Miranda was already on her feet, scanning intel from their global network of allies. "The global response to Carter is unprecedented," she said, her voice tight with excitement. "We've got governments calling for investigations, public support pouring in from every corner of the globe. But there's something we haven't accounted for: Carter's personal network of mercenaries. He's gathered a private army, loyal to him above all else, and he's planning something big. It's the calm before the storm." Musk stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing. If he's going to make a move, it'll be soon. We need to hit him before he gets the chance to regroup. We've exposed him. Now it's time to remove the remaining pieces of his operation. Ethan looked up from his laptop. "We've got intel on a key meeting happening tomorrow. Top leaders from the remaining factions loyal to Carter are gathering. If we can disrupt that meeting, it could be the blow that brings the whole operation down." Musk considered this for a moment. The idea of a direct assault on Carter's remaining stronghold was appealing, but it was also dangerous. Their team had grown from a few trusted allies to an international network, but they still faced a powerful adversary, one who wouldn't hesitate to strike back with everything he had. "We go in," Musk said finally, "but we do it carefully. We won't make the same mistakes Carter did. We have the element of surprise on our side, and we need to leverage it." The plan was set into motion. The team split up, each member assigned a critical role. Miranda and Maya would handle the digital side, ensuring that any communication about the meeting was intercepted and the truth would be broadcast to the world. Ethan and a small crew of operatives would infiltrate the location of the meeting, gathering intel and ensuring that Carter's remaining allies were neutralized. Musk would be the wild card, keeping in direct contact with the team and making the final call once they were in position. The target was a heavily fortified compound hidden in the outskirts of a European city. It was a place where power brokers and shadowy figures gathered, away from the eyes of the public. Here, Carter's most loyal supporters would meet in secret, and Musk's team would have to breach their defenses without drawing attention to themselves. As they neared the compound, the night was eerily quiet. The tension in the air was palpable. Musk's heart raced, but he kept his focus. This was it. The moment they had been working toward for months. If they succeeded, they would decimate the rest of Carter's operation. If they failed, it would mean the end of their movement and the beginning of a retaliatory war. Miranda's voice crackled through the earpiece. I've just shut down their comms. You've got a window to strike. Go. Ethan's team moved swiftly, using the cover of darkness to slip through the security perimeter. They encountered minimal resistance at first, their tactical gear and advanced stealth techniques allowing them to infiltrate with ease. But as they approached the central meeting area, they encountered a surprise. An army of mercenaries was already stationed inside. They're expecting us, Ethan muttered into the comms. We've got to adjust. I'll send a team around the back entrance to disrupt their line of defense. Musk clenched his fists. He had expected some form of retaliation, but this was a larger force than they'd anticipated. Do what you need to do. We can't let them escape. The battle for control of the compound raged on. Ethan's team engaged the mercenaries with calculated precision, but the numbers were stacked against them. Musk watched the live feed from the command center, his heart in his throat as he saw the skirmishes unfold. The world's fate was hanging in the balance, and he couldn't afford to fail. Miranda's voice broke through his thoughts. Musk, we've got the data. We've cracked Carter's encrypted files. There's a backup plan, Carter's final escape route. It leads to a private jet at a nearby airfield. He's planning to flee once this all goes south. Musk's eyes narrowed. Not if I have anything to say about it. We need to get there first. We can't let him leave. Minutes later, Musk and a small team of operatives were speeding toward the airfield, the sound of the engine roaring in his ears. His mind was consumed by one thought. Carter couldn't be allowed to escape. They arrived at the airfield just as Carter's private jet was preparing to take off. Musk and his team stormed the runway, cutting off any potential escape routes. Carter's figure appeared at the entrance of the jet, his eyes wide with panic as he realized the trap was closing in on him. End of the line, Carter, Musk said coldly, stepping forward. The smug, confident man who had once believed he could control the world looked deflated, broken. You don't understand what you've done, Musk. You think this is the end? It's only the beginning. Musk's eyes locked onto Carter's. No, this is the end. For you. For your empire. For everything you've built. In a move that seemed to happen in slow motion, Musk signaled to his team. They surrounded Carter, ensuring there would be no escape. Carter made one last attempt to flee, but it was futile. The doors to his jet were sealed, and the ground beneath his feet had shifted irrevocably. As Musk watched Carter surrender, he felt a mix of exhaustion and triumph. The world had been turned upside down, but they had succeeded. Musk had taken down the man who had tried to control everything. Maya, who had been quietly studying a report on the global financial system, looked up. A decentralized economy could work, but we'll need to disrupt the current financial system. The banks, the money system, they're all part of the old guard. We need to give people alternatives to the status quo, something that can't be manipulated or controlled. Musk's eyes lit up. That's it. We build a new financial system, one that doesn't rely on centralized institutions. We use blockchain and cryptocurrency to give the people control over their own money. No more being at the mercy of banks, no more hidden agendas. Miranda smiled. You mean, create a global economy that's fully decentralized? That's ambitious, but it could work. We've already seen how cryptocurrencies can challenge the traditional banking system. And it's not just about finance, Musk added. We'll build a platform for governance that allows the people to have a direct say in how they're ruled. Democracy needs to be more than just a vote every few years. It needs to be a constant, participatory process. A system where transparency and accountability are the rule, not the exception. The room was silent for a moment, each member of the team absorbing the magnitude of Musk's vision. A new world order, born from the ashes of the old one, was beginning to take shape. "We'll need to gather allies," Maya said, her tone thoughtful. "We can't do this alone. There are others out there who want change, leaders in tech, in finance, in government. But we have to be careful. We don't want to replace one corrupt system with another." "That's the key," Musk said. "This has to be a revolution of the people, by the people. We'll need to recruit people who believe in the vision of a new world, one that's built on transparency, equality, and collective power. And we need to keep it decentralized so that no one person or organization can hijack the movement." The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Musk and his team began to implement their vision, building a decentralized infrastructure that would allow people from around the world to contribute to the creation of a new order. Blockchain technology became the foundation for a new economic system, one that eliminated the need for banks and gave power back to the people. With the global momentum still strong, it wasn't long before governments, businesses, and individuals began to take notice. But there were obstacles. The old power structures didn't give up easily. The CIA, the military-industrial complex, and corrupt politicians began to mount a counteroffensive. They were still reeling from Carter's downfall, but they weren't about to let Musk and his team change the rules without a fight. But as he stared at the now dismantled empire, he knew there was still much work to do. The system that had allowed men like Carter to rise had not disappeared. And while this battle was won, the war to rebuild a fairer, more transparent world was only beginning. Musk turned away from Carter, his mind already turning to the future. The fight had just begun, but Musk was ready. The revolution was in full swing. The arrest of Carter was broadcasted worldwide, a moment that marked the end of an era of hidden power and control by shadowy figures who had shaped history behind closed doors. As the dust settled from the global chaos, the people were left to pick up the pieces and rebuild. Musk, however, knew that while the fall of Carter was a victory, it was only the beginning of something much larger. The system that had allowed corruption to fester for so long wasn't going to be dismantled by the exposure of one man alone. The old ways were deeply ingrained, and the fight for true change would require far more than a few leaks or a public spectacle. The world had been awoken. Now, it was time to give them a new direction. Inside the safe house, Musk gathered his team once more. Their faces were a mixture of relief and exhaustion. They had made it this far, but there was still a sense that the hardest part was ahead of them. "We've done it," Miranda said, her voice filled with pride, but with a note of concern. "But Carter was just one part of the machine. We still have to address the other pieces, the ones who've been operating in the shadows for years. The military-industrial complex, the intelligence agencies, the corrupt politicians, the global corporations. None of that changes overnight." Musk nodded, his mind already running through the possibilities. "You're right. Exposing Carter was just the first step. But now, we've got the people on our side, and they're demanding change. We have a window, and we can't afford to waste it." Ethan leaned in. "The question is, how do we do this? We can't just keep exposing people. Eventually, that loses its impact. We need to think bigger, more strategically. We need to offer a real alternative, something that can unite the people and build a new system that doesn't rely on the same corrupt foundations." Musk thought for a moment. "We start by giving the people the tools to take back control. We've seen the power of collective action, the protests, the global calls for justice. It's time to shift the power from the hands of the few to the hands of the many. We need a decentralized system, one that makes power accessible to everyone, not just those at the top." "We knew this wouldn't be easy," Musk said, watching news reports of anti-Musk rhetoric spreading across the media. "The system isn't just going to roll over. They'll fight back, and they'll do everything they can to turn the people against us." Miranda nodded. "We've already seen it. They're pushing disinformation, trying to discredit us. They're framing us as dangerous radicals who want to destabilize the world. They've even started funding opposition movements to disrupt the decentralized platforms we've set up." Ethan grimaced. "They're not just going after us. They're going after anyone who supports this new vision. They're trying to brand us as terrorists, as enemies of the state." Musk's voice was calm, but there was steel in his tone. "Let them. This isn't about us. It's about the people. We've given them the truth. and they're not going to back down. The more they attack us, the more they make our case for us. People are waking up, and there's no going back. The battle for the future had begun in earnest. Musk and his team faced increasing pressure from all sides. But with every challenge, their resolve only grew stronger. They built alliances with tech innovators, activists, and thinkers from around the world. Slowly, but surely, the decentralized movement began to take hold. It wasn't easy, and the road ahead was fraught with challenges. But Musk had one thing the old powers didn't: the people. The people had awakened, and they weren't going to let the corrupt systems of the past dictate their future. A new world was emerging, one where power wasn't concentrated in the hands of the few, but spread out among the many. And as Musk stood at the forefront of this revolution, he knew that this was only the beginning. The rise of a new order was inevitable. The question now was, how far would they go to build it? The future had arrived, and it was up to Musk and his allies to shape it. As Musk's movement continued to gain momentum, the old guard's counteroffensive grew fiercer. The initial chaos that followed Carter's arrest had settled into a tense, silent struggle, one that played out not just on the streets, but in the shadows, where power still resided. The world had glimpsed the cracks in the system, but the true battle was now being fought behind closed doors, with corporate giants, military contractors, and intelligence agencies deploying every tool at their disposal to prevent Musk's revolution from succeeding. Musk knew this would be the hardest part. The enemy wasn't just a corrupt few. It was a deeply entrenched system with billions at stake. A system that had spent decades, centuries, even, consolidating power and control over every facet of life. Taking it down wouldn't be as simple as exposing a few more conspiracies. This would require something much deeper, more systemic. And it wouldn't just be a matter of information. It would be a war of influence, strategy, and manipulation. The battlefronts weren't visible, but they were everywhere. A well-funded media campaign was attempting to tarnish Musk's image, painting him as a dangerous anarchist intent on throwing the world into chaos. Financial systems had begun to counteract the decentralized cryptocurrency model Musk's team had set up, creating regulatory and legal hurdles to undermine the new economic framework. Even their tech platforms had come under attack, with state-sponsored hackers attempting to breach their security and disrupt communications. Inside the safe house, the team had gathered once again, this time with a more somber tone. Musk could feel the weight of the war pressing in on him. They weren't just fighting for control over a few nations anymore. They were fighting for the future of a global society. "We're in the fight of our lives," Musk said, staring down at the maps and data scattered on the table in front of him. "The stakes have never been higher. Our decentralized networks are under siege from all angles. They're pushing disinformation, trying to infiltrate and sabotage our communications, and using every dirty trick to discredit us." Miranda, ever pragmatic, nodded. "They're not just trying to discredit you, Musk. They're trying to create a rift between you and the people. They're playing up the narrative that you're a tech billionaire trying to seize control, not liberate anyone." Ethan leaned in, his face grim. "And they've got a hell of a lot of power behind them. The intelligence agencies are in overdrive, feeding false reports to the press, planting spies in our ranks. It's like they've gone back to the playbook of the Cold War, only now they've got even more resources at their disposal." Musk looked at his team. They had done so much, exposed secrets, built a new system of governance, and united millions under a common cause. But now, the real battle had begun. "We can't afford to let them divide us," Musk said. "The people have spoken. The truth is on our side, and we need to keep pushing forward. We have the momentum. We can't let them drag us back into the shadows." In the midst of the chaos, Musk's message remained clear. The battle was not just about technology, or finance, or politics. It was about the very essence of freedom itself, the freedom of people to determine their own future, free from the manipulation of those who had held power for too long. Weeks passed, and the old powers began to realize that their attacks were only strengthening Musk's cause. The more they tried to discredit him, the more resilient the movement became. Public support for the decentralized system surged. People were fed up with the corruption, the lies, and the old way of doing things. But even as Musk's influence grew, the fight wasn't over. In fact, it was only intensifying. The global elite wasn't going to give up without a final stand. Musk knew that if they were to succeed, they needed to win not just in the digital world, but in the real world as well. Governments would need to come on board, or the world would descend into chaos. It was time to use their newfound power for the final push, a push that would reshape the very fabric of global society. Musk's final speech before the United Nations sent shockwaves through the world. He stood before the assembled leaders of nations, offering them a choice. Continue down the path of corruption and control, or join the people in building a new, decentralized future. It's no longer just about us, Musk said, his voice steady, his gaze unwavering. It's about the next generation, a generation that will no longer tolerate a world built on inequality and deception, a generation that demands transparency, justice, and true freedom. The people are calling for a new way forward, and we will answer that call. The world watched in silence, waiting for a response. What would the global elite do now? And then, as if the weight of history itself had pressed upon the moment, the first of many leaders stood up, and they didn't oppose him. Instead, they reached out their hands in support. They knew, deep down, that the world had changed, and the old order was no longer tenable. The revolution was no longer just a dream. It was reality. The final push had begun, and Musk's vision for a new world was on the brink of becoming a reality. The war was not yet over, but the battle had been won. The system was crumbling, and the people were rising. The next few weeks saw Musk's team engaging in a series of covert operations designed to counteract the growing influence of the old power structures. They recruited more insiders, whistleblowers, former intelligence agents, and tech experts who had once been part of the establishment but now shared Musk's vision of a decentralized future. Meanwhile, global protests were escalating. People in every corner of the world were rallying behind Musk's cause, demanding a fairer, more transparent system. The momentum was undeniable. But the power elite had deep pockets and far-reaching influence. They could afford to keep fighting back, at least, for a while. One of their biggest attacks came in the form of a cyber attack that knocked out a large portion of Musk's new decentralized platform. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a direct hit on the heart of the revolution. The people were furious, their trust in the new system wavering. The media seized on the opportunity, spreading fear about the security of decentralized governance. Miranda worked tirelessly, scrambling to patch the system and ensure the integrity of the platform. This wasn't just a random attack. They've got an army of hackers working against us, and they're going after our weak spots. Musk stood in front of a large screen, watching as the situation unfolded. He knew the stakes. This was their most critical challenge yet. If they couldn't recover quickly, if the people began to lose faith, it could all come crashing down. They're trying to break our spirit, Musk said quietly, eyes fixed on the screen. But they're making a mistake. The people are more powerful than they realize. As the team worked to shore up the platform's security, Musk reached out to his global network. He issued a call to action, rallying cry to the millions who had supported him from the start. It's time to show them who we are, he said in a broadcast that went out to every corner of the internet. They think they can silence us, that they can divide us, that they can crush our movement with fear and manipulation. But the people will not be silenced. We will rebuild, stronger than before. This is our revolution, and no one can take it from us. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Activists, hackers, and supporters around the world rallied together to push back against the system. Volunteers flooded in to help rebuild the decentralized platform, reinforcing the very foundation that the opposition had tried to tear apart. You're right, Musk agreed. But we've planted the seed of something unstoppable. People have tasted freedom, and they won't easily give it up. This is a fight for hearts and minds now. It's not just about technology or systems. It's about changing the way people think about power and their role in the world. In the weeks following the historic UN speech and the unprecedented global shift, the new decentralized economy began to take root. Blockchain technology, once seen as a niche innovation, was now the backbone of the world's financial system. Cryptocurrencies, once regarded with skepticism, had become the standard currency for trade and business across borders. But as Musk and his team had feared, not everyone embraced this new world. Governments who had long relied on control over currency began to tighten their grip, attempting to regulate the decentralized systems and return power to centralized banks. Corporate interests, particularly in the defense and energy sectors, scrambled to maintain their hold on power. The media, once the mouthpiece of the powerful elite, now became a battleground. Traditional outlets that had been complicit in the old order's manipulation started to lose credibility as people turned to independent news sources and decentralized platforms. Musk's movement wasn't just about financial freedom. It was about dismantling the entire infrastructure that had enabled misinformation and propaganda for decades. Musk had long warned that the battle was never going to be easy. But now, even as the revolution had succeeded in toppling the old order, the struggle for a truly just and transparent system was just beginning. People are waking up, Maya said as she reviewed reports from around the globe. Everywhere we look, there are people fighting to take control of their future. New movements are popping up in every country. Activists, community leaders, ordinary citizens all pushing for this new vision. But the resistance is strong, Musk said, his voice somber. They've got deep pockets, and they've been around for too long. It's going to be a long battle, and we need to be prepared for the pushback. Miranda glanced at Musk. But we're not just fighting them anymore. We're giving people the ability to fight for themselves. That's the difference. This time, they can't rely on a single leader, a single government, or a single system. We've given them the power. Musk leaned back, contemplating the future. The old system wanted to control everything. Information, resources, power. They thought they could control people's lives by controlling those things. But they underestimated the power of decentralized action. We've given people the tools to take back control. The next phase of the revolution was about to begin. The world had been irrevocably changed, but the battle for the future was far from over. Months passed, and the global landscape continued to shift. The decentralized platforms Musk had championed evolved into new forms of governance. Cities became more self-sufficient, driven by the principles of collective action and shared resources. Blockchain technology allowed citizens to directly participate in decision-making processes, voting on policies, and ensuring accountability through transparent systems. But the opposition was not gone. Former power structures attempted to regain their influence through economic pressure, propaganda, and even military action in some regions. And while the people were more empowered than ever, they also had to grapple with new challenges: how to maintain a balance between personal freedoms and collective responsibility, how to ensure equality in a system that was still in its infancy, and how to safeguard their newfound power from those who would exploit it for their own gain. The fight for the future had only just begun, but Musk knew, more than ever, that the road ahead was one they would travel together. The moment had arrived. The world stood on the precipice of an entirely new future, one that was no longer dictated by the powerful few, but by the collective will of the people. The revolution, which had started as an idea and grown into a movement, had now become the defining force of the next era. But even as the first steps of this new world were being taken, the road ahead remained uncertain. Musk stood in front of a large monitor in the command center of the operation, watching as news outlets across the globe broadcasted the most significant event in modern history. The world leaders, those who had once fought against the revolution, had finally come to the table. It was no longer a matter of opposition, but of collaboration. The entire system was undergoing a transformation, one that would affect every aspect of life, from finance to governance, from technology to human rights. For years, Musk had fought for this very moment, when the people would no longer be passive bystanders, but active participants in shaping their world. But now that it was here, a strange sense of uncertainty lingered. They had shattered the old system, yes, but what would rise in its place? Would the new system truly be one of equality and justice, or would it become just another shadow of the past? He looked around the room at his team, their faces tired but hopeful. They had endured so much: battles fought in the media, cyber attacks, and countless obstacles. But they had pushed through, driven by a shared belief that they could make the world a better place. "This is it," Miranda said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We've done everything we set out to do. The people are in control now, but we can't let our guard down. There are still forces out there who want to take us down. We've won this round, but the war for the future is far from over. Musk nodded. I know, but the people have shown that they're ready for change. We've given them the tools. Now, it's up to them to take it from here. We can't control it all. It's time for a new era, one where power doesn't lie in the hands of a few, but in the hands of everyone. Ethan, who had been silently observing, spoke up. We've seen how the system reacts when it feels threatened. It's not just going to let go that easily. We need to be prepared for the inevitable resistance. The people might have the power now, but they'll face challenges ahead, especially from the old power structures that won't just disappear. Musk, however, remained resolute. He had known that this was never going to be a perfect system, but it was a start. It was a chance to build something better, something fairer. This is just the beginning, he said during a broadcast to the world, as millions watched. We've come a long way, but the real work is in the building. The people have the power now, and it's up to each and every one of us to make sure that we don't squander it. This is our chance to create something that's never been done before. An open, transparent, and fair world. The world was changing before their eyes, and Musk knew that the next generation would be the ones to take it further. The revolution wasn't just about the end of the old world. It was about the creation of a new one, a world that was still in its infancy, but one that would continue to evolve, grow, and improve with time. The fight for the future had just begun, and Musk, for all the challenges ahead, couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of hope. It was a new dawn, a world where power truly belonged to the people, and that, he knew, was worth fighting for. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?